Vladimir and Vasper stared into each other's eyes. Both gazes locked, intense, and deadly serious. As if the air between them had thickened with unspoken war. Vasper's arm was wrapped tightly around Shanta's waist. His fingers splayed wide, his grip unyielding, possessive. The pressure of his hold spoke louder than words. A silent declaration etched into the very space between them. She's mine. She belongs to me. Shanti clung to Vasper's bare torso, her delicate fingers curling slightly against the rigid planes of his chest. The warmth of his skin bled into hers, but it did nothing to soothe the icy confusion swirling inside her. He wore nothing but swimming trunks, his body damp, sculpted, exuding primal dominance. Yet she barely noticed it through the storm in her mind. Something in her stirred. Anxiety clawed up her spine, prickling her skin like electricity dancing just beneath the surface. Why was she so anxious? Why did her breath catch when she looked at the man standing before them? Vasper's brother? Vladimir. Yes, they were siblings. But they'd never been close. And now, a rift had formed, silent yet seismic. Shaped by complicated feelings and unspoken truths. Vasper knew, he felt, that Vladimir harbored emotions for Shanti. It was obvious. Though she wore his ring, bore his name, shared his bed, it didn't stop the gnawing unease in his chest. Vladimir's presence wasn't a threat in power, but in something far more dangerous, in tension. Vasper felt it. The tension seeped into his stance. His frame subtly shifting. Shoulders stiffening, body angled just slightly in front of her. As if shielding her. Vladimir moved, his steps measured, smooth, calculated. He approached without hesitation, stopping just shy of invading their space. A respectful distance, yes, but not far enough to ease Vasper's fury. There was a smile on Vladimir's lips. Small, crooked, inexplicable. The kind that suggested secrets. His gaze wandered, not boldly, but enough. Enough to land on Shanti. Enough to make Vasper's pulse pound like war drums. Vasper's jaw tightened. Not because Vladimir was a match in power, he wasn't. He had no supernatural gift, no otherworldly edge. But still. Vasper's possessiveness boiled beneath his skin like lava. No other man should look at her that way. Not even his brother. Especially not his brother. His jealousy was a storm, violent and inescapable. He despised the fact that he felt it. He hated how it reminded him of Jake Valerian, the rival who never stayed down, never accepted defeat. Yet Vladimir was different. Like a quiet river hiding perilous depths beneath the still surface. A man without powers, but not without presence. He moved with confidence. Not loud or overbearing, but quiet, commanding. His frame wasn't as broad as Vasper's, but it held its own power. A different kind of magnetism. And no matter how different they were, one truth bound them. The blood of Alexander Mondragon ran through both their veins. Brothers by lineage. Sons of the same king. The legacy of that blood whispered in their eyes. Their stature, the weight of their presence. Vladimir reached into his pocket with calm purpose. From it, he retrieved a small, round, black device, coin-sized, sleek. Without a word, he offered it to Vasper. Shanta's brow furrowed, lips parting slightly. Her eyes flicked to the object with a curiosity she couldn't hide. Vasper took it. His fingers brushing Vladimir's for a brief, tense moment. He didn't blink. Didn't waver. His eyes stayed locked onto his brother's, cold and hard. A silent challenge. You don't get to look at her. You don't get to want her. Only when he had to. Vasper looked down at the device in his hand. Vladimir's expression shifted. Arms crossing over his chest, spine straight. He stood there not just as a sibling, but now as someone addressing his king. Shanta's gaze bounced between them, then dropped to the mysterious object. But the moment she glanced at Vladimir again, she caught his eyes. They weren't smiling, and yet they were. There was a message there. An intimate whisper she couldn't hear but somehow felt. It unsettled her. It felt wrong. Quickly, she tore her eyes away, her jaw clenching. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. She refused to let him feel seen. Vasper pressed the device. A quiet hum filled the space, and a soft light bloomed. The coin activated like a projector, casting a hologram in the air, Laika's face, contorted with fury. Her voice was loud, rapid, sharp, echoing in the language of the inner world. Dragons flew behind her, wings slicing the sky of Volantis Noctem, fierce and majestic. She looked like a queen. A storm. But Vasper didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. Not at Laika's rage, not at the dragons, not at the chaos captured in that single moment. To him, none of it mattered. Not compared to this moment. Meanwhile, Vladimir's eyes never left Shanti. His gaze was unwavering, intense. Like he was trying to memorize her. She turned to him again, puzzled by Laika's words, and their eyes met. Only for a heartbeat. But it was long enough to jolt something inside her. She hated that look. Not because it frightened her, but because it made her feel something she shouldn't. He was her brother-in-law. And yet, he had feelings for her. She could see it in the depths of his eyes. Taste it in the tension hanging between them. But he had no right. He shouldn't be making her feel anything at all. Not now. Not ever. Men like him are infuriating, she thought bitterly. Vasper noticed. He caught that glance, quick, but telling. He turned sharply, his stare lashing out at Vladimir like a blade. Then, with a flick of his hand, annoyed, dismissive, he tossed the device back. Vladimir caught it effortlessly. His hand moved like water, smooth and precise, not a single beat missed. Shanti blinked in surprise. He flipped the coin once, caught it again, then pocketed it with casual flair. A sigh escaped him, soft and unreadable, as he turned away, reaching for a glass of champagne on the bar. He took a sip, quiet, detached. When he turned again, Shanti was walking away. Her bare feet padded across the sleek floors of the yacht as she climbed toward the third floor. Toward their room. She didn't look back. Vladimir's heart sank. A dull weight pressed against his chest, heavy, suffocating. He didn't want her to go. Not yet. He wanted to call out, to stop her, to see her eyes one last time. But he couldn't. He wasn't allowed. The restraint burned through every vein like acid. His body was tense, every muscle rigid with withheld longing. He was drowning in it. Drowning in feelings he couldn't touch. Couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. His entire body was stiff, restraining himself was agonizing. He felt like he was sinking deeper and deeper into a quicksand of forbidden longing. And the more he tried to resist it, the more it consumed him. Shanti moved quickly, her pace brisk. Halfway up the stairs, she glanced over her shoulder, toward Vasper. He stood still, eyes following her. But just before her gaze could meet his, he looked away and turned to Vladimir. Now their eyes met again. What Vladimir saw in Vasper's eyes wasn't brotherly. It was a warning. Cold. Sharp. Unmistakable. Stay away from her. They stood motionless, locked in a standoff, silence thick between them. The air vibrated with unsaid words as Vasper and Vladimir stared into each other's eyes. The stillness around them deceiving, like a calm before a thunderstorm. Every blink, every breath was a silent probe, an attempt to read the other's thoughts. Vasper's chest rose and fell slowly, deliberately, refusing to give in to the storm that threatened to rise within him. He wouldn't be provoked. Not yet. Vladimir might have been his half-brother, but he was just a normal being, no magic. No supernatural strength. And still, there was something about him that made Vasper's blood stir with unease. He reminded himself. This man had responsibility. He wasn't just a visitor, he was a royal. Bred in courtly diplomacy and duty. And though they shared the same father, Vladimir was, in truth, the more dutiful son. Unlike Vasper, whose life had been carved by war, betrayal, and pain, Vladimir had thrived in the politics of Volantis, building his reputation with charm and strategy. But it was more than duty that unsettled Vasper. Like Vasper, Vladimir had been with many women. But what unsettled Vasper was how some of these women, Zalora, for instance, had shown interest in him instead of Vladimir. And now, Shanti. She was his wife, his queen. And yet, he could feel that same flicker in Vladimir's eyes. Not lust, no, it was worse. It was longing. A yearning quiet and deep. Was it a coincidence? Or had Vladimir always competed with him in silence? He could never ask, not aloud. Instead, he broke the silence with a voice that echoed with authority. Return to Volantis Noctum. Vasper said, each syllable deliberate, heavy with command. And tell Laika I don't appreciate her complaints about the tasks I've assigned her. He moved to the bar with effortless strength. The heavy steps of a man used to being obeyed. His hand reached for the bottle of whiskey like a blade returning to its sheath. He poured himself a shot in one fluid motion, swallowed it whole. Then placed the glass down, hard. Tell her we're finishing our honeymoon here. He continued, not even glancing at Vladimir. She'll wait until I return. And the dragons. Handle them. That's your specialty, isn't it? Making a show of things? Then show me something useful. Find out what's causing the unrest. His eyes, sharp as flint, flicked back to Vladimir. And another thing. Why did you come here yourself? You could have sent someone else. This didn't require your personal touch. The suspicion in his voice was subtle, but it rang out like steel against stone. Vasper wasn't just irritated, he was digging. He wanted the truth. Or at least a reaction. Vladimir approached slowly, with the practiced grace of a diplomat. No sudden moves, no sharp edges. He was calm, controlled. A man who had worn masks for years. He took another bottle, poured 2 glasses, one for Vasper, one for himself. Each motion was slow, purposeful, calculated. His expression didn't flinch. No pride. No anger. Just silence and intent. He extended the drink to Vasper, then raised his own glass, a silent toast. Brother to brother. Vasper accepted the glass reluctantly. He didn't want it. But refusing would say too much. They clinked glasses. Hollow. Emotionless. He drank it in a single gulp and set the glass down like dropping a weight. Symbolic. Finished. Vladimir's chuckle was soft, but not warm. He sipped his whiskey. Then met Vasper's gaze again, this time. His voice was colder, stripped of the earlier pretense. It's faster if I come myself, he said, low and direct. Besides, I already know what's disturbing the dragons. Vasper's jaw flexed subtly, the muscle ticking near his cheekbone. He said nothing, listening. At the hunting grounds. Vladimir continued. There's a dragon, unfamiliar. It's surrounded by sky ice. The others avoid it. He let the words land, watching Vasper's reaction closely. Zalora's team is there now, studying it. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes burned with something more, pride. Challenge, maybe even warning. Vasper's face darkened, but he didn't raise his voice. Then handle it. He replied coldly. Do your job. And don't interrupt my honeymoon again. He poured another glass. Didn't drink. Just stared at it, the glass tight in his hand. His body was taut, jaw clenched, breath slow. You know how Laika is. Vladimir added quietly, almost amused. Vasper let out a short breath, half a laugh. That's true. She never changes. Then his gaze shifted, and something unreadable passed through his eyes. But this is the first time you've visited me, he said, voice softer now. Well, except when you went to Shanta's home. He watched Vladimir closely. I won't ask how you found it. I know you have your ways. I'm not underestimating you. Vladimir didn't speak. His face was stone, eyes narrowing. Silence sharper than a dagger. But this, Vasper continued, leaning forward slightly, voice calm but cutting. This is the first time you've really made time for me. You could have sent anyone. But you came yourself. His words hung in the air like a veiled accusation. Quiet, dangerous. Vladimir's fingers tapped once on the glass. His expression didn't change. But the weight of it was heavy. Vasper tilted his head, just slightly. Why are you really here? His voice was quieter now. Not cold, but lethal. Don't insult me by saying it's business. The tension snapped tight between them, silent but suffocating. Vladimir chuckled again. But there was no humor in it. It was the laugh of a man exposed and uncaring. Vasper had seen through him. Maybe he had even read Shanta's memories. Maybe he knew more than he let on. Had he seen it? The confession? The moment when Vladimir had let the truth slip. The truth he should have buried? Possibly. But they were still kings. Still royals. And though they both stood still, neither moved to strike. Vasper had granted mercy, for now. Vladimir's gaze locked with Vasper's once more. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just a look. A challenge. A truth. A promise of war, held in silence. You're impressive, I'll give you that, Vladimir said with a half-laugh. His boots echoing softly on the polished deck as his eyes roamed over the sprawling luxury of the yacht. But this? He scoffed, gesturing around the quiet expanse. Seriously? Just the two of you? No security detail? Not even a personal chef? He shook his head, chuckling in disbelief. You're a king now, Vasper. You should know better than to be this. Trusting. Especially when her life. He jerked his chin toward the third quarters. Is what's at stake? Vasper turned slowly, a low, confident laugh rumbling from his chest like distant thunder. Vladimir, he said, voice smooth as steel. We can handle ourselves. He took a step closer, the power in his presence pressing like a tide. I can handle our safety. His eyes sharpened with a warrior's certainty. The strength I hold is equal to 100 palace guards. A smirk curled at the corner of his lips. And besides, he added, tilting his head slightly, I can cook. Especially when it's for my queen. He let the words hang, deliberate, almost taunting. So stop worrying about things that no longer concern you. That quiet arrogance. It simmered just beneath the surface. Thick enough to choke on. And it lit a fuse in Vladimir's chest. You're so damn full of yourself. Vladimir snapped. The humor draining from his face. Replaced by a hard scowl. You think you're invincible. But you're not. His voice darkened, turning jagged with bitterness. What happens if someone attacks? What if an enemy finds you here? Unguarded, unprepared. And storms this yacht? Will you fight them off while Shanti hides below deck? Praying you make it in time? His hand sliced through the air. She's not just your lover anymore. She's your wife. An asset. A liability. A target. You don't just protect her because you love her. You protect her because people will come for her to get to you. A sharp, mirthless laugh escaped him. But you don't care, do you? Because you're powerful. The words were barely out of his mouth before the air exploded. Vasper moved like a lightning strike. One powerful shove, and Vladimir's body lifted clean off the deck, slamming into the iron railing with a bone-jarring crack. The yacht trembled with the force of impact. A chair toppling over, the wind stealing a sharp curse from his lips. Had he hit just a foot farther, he'd have been in the sea. Vladimir groaned, ribs screaming as he clutched the railing, lungs grasping for air. The weight of that blow wasn't just physical. It carried fury, legacy, the raw, untamed fire of Vasper's power. Furniture skidded across the polished wood. A glass shattered somewhere behind them. The scene was chaos carved in silence. Vasper's chest heaved, his jaw clenched, eyes alight with rage. A glowing gold flickered in their depths. A flash of something ancient, something dangerous. He stood firm, poised, a soldier molded by war. Vladimir leaned on the railing, pain sharp in his lungs. But his smirk returned, feigned and taunting, even through the winds. The space between them was no longer filled with words. Only violence waiting to erupt. Then, footsteps. Fast, frantic, descending. Vasper. Her voice. Shanti. She flew down the stairs, dress flowing behind her. Eyes wide with panic as she took in the wreckage, the broken furniture, the tension in the air, and the burning storm behind her husband's eyes. Without thinking, Vasper turned and caught her, wrapping her tight in his arms. Her hands grasped at his sleeves, eyes jumping between the two men. Stop, she breathed, voice trembling. Vladimir had straightened by now, brushing himself off, though the pain was clear in the stiffness of his movements. He offered a lopsided, mocking smile. Apologies, he murmured, voice dripping with false calm. Didn't mean to crash your honeymoon. Your husband just misunderstood my concern. But hey, outer world's not exactly a safe haven. No guards, no staff. Just two lovers playing royal in a floating palace. His eyes darted between them, lingering on Shanti, then narrowing at Vasper. You're meddling too much, Vladimir. Vasper growled, his body shifting slightly to shield Shanti. We wanted peace. Privacy. You ruined it the moment you set foot on this yacht. Shanti clung to his arm, voice quiet but firm. Vasper, please. She looked up at him, desperation etched into her delicate features. You don't have to fight him to prove anything. Just talk. You're brothers. He didn't answer. His chest still rose and fell with barely restrained fury. Please, she said again, softer now. Go rinse off. Let's eat. Let's just stop this before it gets worse. Then she turned to Vladimir. Please, go home. Her tone didn't waver. She wasn't asking for peace for herself. She was demanding it for all of them. Her eyes shimmered with emotion, but she stood strong. Vasper's voice was like ice. Sorry, he muttered. Go home. Vladimir met his gaze. That cold tone. It wasn't for him. It was for her. Calculated. Controlled. And he knew it. He exhaled sharply through his nose, smiling bitterly. Of course. Without another word, he turned and walked to the helipad. But he didn't look away. Not when Vasper kissed Shanti. Not when she melted into him like a final piece clicking into place. Something twisted inside Vladimir's chest. It wasn't just pain. It was a hollow burn. A silent scream. Something deeper than bruises. By the time he reached his vehicle, the sky was too bright. The steel of the deck too sharp. He looked to the horizon. There. A gleam. An island. Clustered mobile homes glittering under the sun. Remote. Isolated. Probably Vespers too. Lunatic. He muttered. He kicked his vehicle door, not enough to damage it. Just enough to let the fury out. It hissed open. He slid inside. Fists clenched. Jaw tight. Jealousy burned like acid in his throat. He shouldn't feel this way, but he did. And it wouldn't go away. He flicked on the radar. Empty sea. No witnesses. Good. His fingers danced over the console. The cloaking device shimmered to life. His vehicle vanished. But his eyes remained locked on the screen. The island. Something about it pulled at him. Not rage. Not envy. Something else. Curiosity. Or something darker. Whatever it was. He turned the vehicle. Not toward home. Toward the island. Meanwhile, Shanti and Vesper were on the lower deck of the yacht, where a luxurious jacuzzi was built into the floor, overlooking the open sea. Attached to the jacuzzi was a staircase that led directly down into the clear ocean water. Vesper was leaning against the edge of the jacuzzi, while Shanti rested her back gently against his chest, seated between his legs. His strong arms were wrapped protectively around her body. His face nestled in her hair, breathing in her scent and occasionally placing soft, lingering kisses on her head. Her hand rested on his arm, fingers tracing his skin. The scent of essential oils mingled with the fresh ocean breeze, creating an intoxicating mix of salt, lavender, and something uniquely theirs. Before them, their private paradise stretched out in perfection. White sand beach glowing under the sun, with only their mobile home and another visible in the distance. They were utterly alone, far from the rest of the world. Vesper's lips wandered from her hair to the curve of her neck, kissing her slowly, his tongue teasing her delicate skin as if memorizing every inch. She smiled at the sensation, eyes fluttering closed, letting the heat of his lips and the rhythm of his breath against her skin take over her senses. His mouth drifted to her shoulder, then back again to the other side of her neck, his kisses growing longer, deeper. She exhaled softly, her body melting into his embrace. The pressure of his arms around her tightened slightly, possessively. "Do you know?" Vesper whispered against her ear, flicking his tongue gently along its edge, making her gasp and laugh in surprise. "That there's nothing else I want in this life but to be with you every single day. I don't want to be apart from you. Not even for a second." Shanti giggled from the ticklish sensation, trying to pull her head away. But Vesper held her closer, his embrace firm and filled with need. He chuckled too, their laughter blending into a sweet harmony that filled the space around them. Before it all went quiet again, calm and warm, she rested her head back against his shoulder once more. Vesper planted another kiss on her neck. But this time, he sucked gently on her skin, leaving a small red mark. He was planning to brand her, to leave a trace of him. But just as he was about to go further, he stopped, their eyes meeting. Shanti raised a brow in question. "I guess I shouldn't," he said casually, grinning. "We're going to Paris tomorrow for breakfast, then Japan for lunch, and Brazil for dinner." Shanti's mouth dropped slightly in awe. She stared at him, trying to process if he was joking. But she knew he wasn't. He had the power to teleport, and no plan was ever too far-fetched for Vesper. He leaned in and kissed her again. But this time, it was fiery, hungry, and all-consuming. His hand slid down between her thighs, slipping inside her bikini bottom with expert precision, his fingers immediately finding her clit and teasing it with calculated skill. She gasped, her lips parting as a moan escaped her throat. Her eyes squeezed shut as waves of pleasure rolled through her. His kiss grew even deeper, more demanding. Vasper's fingers moved with rhythmic expertise, as though they had a mind of their own, knowing exactly where to touch, how to press, when to pause. Shanta's moans were soft and breathy at first, but soon her voice grew louder with every stroke of his skilled fingers. Her hand moved to cover his, wanting to feel it all. The pressure, the pace. Her other hand tangled into his damp hair, gripping it as she moaned his name into his lips. Vasper's other hand found her breasts, kneading them gently but with purpose. She felt the hardened bulge pressing against her lower back. It had been there from the moment she leaned into him, but now it was impossibly hard, throbbing with desire. Without a word, Vasper withdrew his hand from between her legs, only to remove her bikini bottom completely. Then he did the same to her bikini top, discarding them gently onto the floor beside the jacuzzi. Now, she was completely naked in front of her husband, vulnerable and beautiful. Vasper lifted her effortlessly out of the water, her slick body clinging to his. She gasped at the sudden motion but made no resistance, trusting him completely. Her legs wrapped loosely around him, her arms around his neck, as he carried her out of the jacuzzi and onto the carpeted floor of the yacht's deck. He sat back against the wide base of the table, laying her gently down as their lips reconnected in a blazing kiss. His hands once again explored her body, his right sliding between her thighs, teasing her wetness, his left caressing her breasts, savoring the way she reacted to every touch. She was moaning again, lost in the rhythm of sensation and need. Vasper pulled back from the kiss, his gaze trailing hungrily down her naked form. He lowered his head to look at the places his hands claimed, watching her body respond, feeling her tremble beneath his touch. Shanti, her head resting on his shoulder, moaned his name again and again, her voice sweet and breathless, driving him to the brink. Their wet bodies radiated heat, and Vasper's fingers grew bolder, more intense. Shanti gasped loudly, her back arching as the pleasure overwhelmed her. Vasper silenced her moans with a kiss so deep, so consuming. It felt like he was drinking in her very soul. Without her even noticing, Vasper teleported them both to the bed in the master suite on the yacht's third floor. She felt the sudden softness beneath her but didn't care. Her mind was lost, her body drowning in the pleasure his touch created. His hands never left her. His lips never stopped claiming her. The only thing that existed in that moment was the two of them, bound by fire, love, and the raw passion that left them breathless and wanting more. Vasper finally released her lips, but instead of pulling away, he swiftly shifted positions, mounting her with a hunger that made her gasp. Yet, even as he moved on top of her, his hand remained pressed between her thighs, possessive and unrelenting. His left elbow was propped against the bed, supporting his weight, while his lips continued their worship of her body, trailing kisses along every inch of her skin from her neck, slowly descending to her breasts. She let out a moan that vibrated through the air, as Vasper's mouth latched onto one of her breasts, then the other, devouring them with passion. He took turns between them, swirling his tongue, sucking gently, then deeply, his lips leaving her flushed and trembling. She instinctively spread her legs wider, completely yielding to him. Her body had surrendered, her soul given over. There was nothing left to hold back. As Vasper's lips moved lower, trailing down her stomach, Shanti gasped again. His tongue swirled around her navel before dipping lower, teasing the soft skin of her pelvis. Anticipation gripped her, her stomach tensing with every breath, until finally, his mouth replaced his hand. He devoured her like a man starved. His tongue danced over her folds, worshipping her with every lick, every kiss, every breath. His mouth trailed along her inner thighs, alternating sides, before returning to the center. His lips locking onto her core, drawing every sweet drop as though it were nectar from the gods. Her body trembled violently, her moans deep and uncontrollable. Her hands tangled into Vasper's hair, gripping tightly, desperate for something to hold onto as her body arched beneath his mouth. Vasper's long hair, once tied back, fell loose from her grip. Her cries grew louder, her hips rising to meet every movement of his tongue, each one more intense than the last. She repeated his name over and over, pleading, begging, her voice raw with need. And Vasper, hearing her unravel beneath him, was only encouraged further. His lips latched onto her clit, sucking with precision and passion. His hands gripped her thighs, spreading her open even more. As her back arched sharply, her mouth open in a silent scream of pleasure, her thighs began to shake, her body quivering uncontrollably. She was close. So close, and Vasper felt it. His hands slid up her body, cupping her breasts once more, squeezing them in time, with his tongue's movements as if demanding, "Give it to me. Let go." And then, she did. Her climax tore through her. A deep, guttural moan ripping from her throat as wave after wave of ecstasy consumed her. Vasper didn't stop. His tongue continued its dance, savoring her essence as she convulsed beneath him. His hands slid from her breasts back to her thighs, holding her firmly as he raised his head to look at her. Her body was still twitching, her breaths ragged, her face flushed and eyes shut tight. She was beautiful, completely his. He looked at her with reverence, gently caressing her swollen core, then leaned down to place tender kisses upon it, each one filled with devotion. His eyes never left her face. This woman, this goddess, now lying open and breathless before him, was his wife, the one he adored above all else. Before she could even recover from her climax, Vasper had already stripped off his swimming trunks and was back on top of her. Their lips found each other again, locked in a passionate, love-drenched kiss. And then he entered her. They both gasped sharply at the contact, a shared moan breaking between their mouths. Her arms wrapped tightly around his torso, clinging to him, her nails dragging gently across his back. Vasper moved slowly at first, savoring the feeling, thrusting deeply with each motion. Every stroke was deliberate, controlled, but overwhelming. His tongue explored her mouth as he moved within her, matching the rhythm of his hips with the intensity of his kiss. Then, suddenly, he reached for a pillow beside Shanta's head, sliding it under her hips. She let out a gasp as the change in angle made their bodies press together even deeper. It was too much. Their connection felt divine, beyond flesh, beyond thought. Each thrust was a wave crashing between them, dragging them closer and closer to the edge of oblivion. Vasper's pace quickened, the sound of their bodies meeting echoing with every thrust. He slid both arms under her, pulling her into a tight embrace. His thrusts became relentless, merciless, as if possessed by the sheer intensity of his love and desire. She could barely breathe from how tightly he held her, how deeply he claimed her. He let go of her mouth, just long enough to whisper into her ear, his voice trembling, "You're so damn perfect to make love to, my love." She smiled through her moans, her voice cracking with pleasure, and held him even tighter. They were close again, so close. Vasper's hips moved faster, harder, matching the rhythmic moans escaping her lips. His groans became rough, animalistic, until finally, together, they came undone. Vasper thrust deeply one last time, his body trembling as he spilled himself inside her, his head buried in her neck. She clung to him, absorbing every pulsing beat of his release. her body milking every drop, savoring every second. Their bodies locked, unmoving, lost in the aftershocks of shared ecstasy. The only sounds in the room were their labored breaths, heavy and desperate, echoing in the stillness. As their breathing began to settle, Vasper lifted his head, eyes searching for hers. Their gazes met, and they smiled. He kissed her once more, this time slowly, reverently, full of affection and warmth. Then, gently, he pulled his arm out from under her back and planted his elbow on the bed, steadying himself. He stared down at her with a soft, satisfied smile, still inside her, not wanting to break the connection just yet. "I love you," he whispered hoarsely, his voice deep and raw. "I love you too, my love," Shanti replied, breathless, glowing. Vasper stayed nestled inside her, their bodies locked in a deep, tender aftermath. His chest heaved softly against hers as he watched her lips part slightly with every breath. She smiled, a lazy, satisfied smile spreading across her face. But the moment their gazes met again, something ignited, an unspoken fire reigniting between them. Without a word, Vasper slowly rolled them over, keeping her on top of him, his hands guiding her hips as she straddled him. She gasped softly as she felt him still hard, still inside her. His grip tightened as his thumbs traced the curves of her waist, gliding up to cup her breasts once more. His palms warm and insistent. She leaned down, her hair cascading like silk curtains around them, and kissed him, hungrily, like she was starving for more of him. Their tongues met again, wet and wild, her hips starting to roll slowly, testing the depth of him. A guttural moan tore from Vasper's throat as he felt her grind, teasing him with long, slow movements that made his head fall back into the pillows. "You drive me insane," he groaned, his fingers digging into her ass as he guided her pace. She bit her lip, watching his face contort with pleasure. She straightened her back, sitting upright on top of him, her hands pressing against his chest for balance. The sight of her, nude, flushed, riding him with slow sensuality, while her breasts bounced with every movement, was enough to make Vasper lose control. He thrust upward sharply, making her cry out, her fingers curling into his chest. Again and again, the rhythm built between them, the slap of their bodies echoing in the cabin like music. Her moans becoming higher, breathier. "Faster, Vasper," she whispered hoarsely. "Fuck me deeper." That was all he needed. In a sudden, fluid motion, he sat up, wrapping his arms around her and flipping her back onto the mattress with his body towering over her. He gripped her wrists and pinned them above her head, his hips driving into hers with hard, relentless thrusts. The bed creaked under them, her body shaking with every stroke as he pounded into her, faster, deeper. Completely unrestrained now, she screamed his name, her legs wrapping tightly around his waist, as he fucked her like a man possessed. The sweat between them made their bodies glide against each other, slick and burning with desire. But he wasn't done. He pulled out suddenly, making Shanti gasp at the loss. "Turn around," he growled. She obeyed instantly, rolling onto all fours, her back arched, presenting herself to him without shame. He ran his hand down the curve of her spine, down to her ass, squeezing and spreading her cheeks before sliding back inside her from behind. They both moaned in unison. This angle was deeper, rawer. He filled her completely, the sound of skin slapping skin echoing louder than before. He gripped her hips tightly, pulling her back onto him with every thrust, his eyes locked on the way her body quivered beneath him. She was a mess, moaning, crying out, shaking from the pleasure building to another climax. Her arms gave out, and her face pressed against the mattress. But Vasper didn't slow down. He leaned over her, biting her shoulder as he fucked her harder, deeper. I'm so close, she whimpered. Please, don't stop. Come for me, baby. He growled into her ear. I want to feel you lose it around me. She screamed, her climax crashing down like a wave. Her inner muscles tightening so hard around him it dragged him over the edge too. With a deep groan, he pushed all the way in and stayed there, his release pouring into her as he bit down on her shoulder to muffle his own growl of pleasure. Their bodies convulsed together, riding every last ripple of their shared orgasm until finally, he collapsed onto her back, both of them breathless, bodies slick with sweat and satisfaction. Their bodies were still pressed together, the heat of their last climax still pulsing through them. But Vasper wasn't done. Not even close. With a wicked smirk, he gently pulled out of her, both of them letting out a breath at the loss of contact. He kissed her shoulder softly, then whispered, "Turn around, my love. Face away from me." She obeyed, her body still trembling as she rolled onto her side, her back now pressed to his chest. Vasper spooned her from behind, his arm sliding under her head to cradle her, the other hand slowly gliding over her waist, pulling her back against his still hard shaft. "Are you ready for more?" he murmured into her ear, his breath hot against her skin. She could only nod, her body already arching for him. And with one slow, delicious push, Vasper slid back inside her from behind, filling her once again, stretching her walls with aching intensity. She gasped. This new angle was even deeper, his cock curving perfectly against her inner walls, hitting spots that made her toes curl and her breath hitch. Vasper groaned behind her, gripping her thigh and hitching it slightly higher to open her more, giving him full access as he began to move long, slow, grinding thrusts that made her body melt into his. But then his hands slid lower, and everything inside her ignited again. His fingers found her clit with deadly precision, rubbing slow, tight circles around the swollen bundle of nerves, matching the rhythm of his deep thrusts. She cried out, her back arching involuntarily, as pleasure coursed through her in sharp, pulsing waves. "Fuck. Vasper. That feels too good," she moaned, her voice shaking. "I know exactly what your body needs, my love." He growled into her neck, biting her softly as his fingers quickened. "And I'm going to give it to you again and again." His cock slid in and out of her soaked heat, slick with both their pleasure, the spooning angle making her feel completely owned, completely claimed. She couldn't even move, not with his muscular arm pinning her leg up, and his body wrapped around hers like a vice. All she could do was take it, and she loved every second of it. The friction inside her, combined with the relentless attention to her clit, drove her mad. She was panting, writhing against him, her moans getting louder with every thrust. His name spilled from her lips like a chant, over and over, broken by gasps and cries. Vasper groaned low in his throat, his own breathing ragged now. "I love how you squeeze me when I touch you like this," he whispered, fingers pressing firmer into her clit. "You're close again," she whimpered, her hands clawing at the sheets. "Yes. I'm gonna come. Oh my God. Let it go, my love. Come for me while I'm inside you, while I'm owning every inch of your beautiful body." With one final deep thrust and a flick of his fingers, she shattered. She screamed his name as her body exploded, her climax so powerful it stole the air from her lungs. Her legs shook, her inner walls clamping down on him like a vice, milking him mercilessly. And that was all it took. Vasper groaned loudly, his hips jerking forward as he followed her over the edge, spilling deep inside her once more. He stayed buried in her, his body shuddering, his chest pressed to her back, one hand still gripping her thigh while the other gently rubbed her clit through the aftershocks, just enough to keep her gasping and twitching in his arms. They lay there, locked in the most intimate of embraces, bodies still joined, breath shallow and uneven. Vasper kissed her shoulder softly, nuzzling into her neck, as their heartbeats slowly returned to rhythm. "I love you," he whispered hoarsely, voice laced with emotion and desire. "I love you too, Vasper," she whispered back, her voice trembling but full of warmth. And in the quiet that followed, wrapped in each other's arms, they drifted into a blissful daze. Still burning, still connected, still insatiably drawn to one another. Her body was still twitching from her last climax when Vasper slowly slid out of her. A trail of warmth followed, but he didn't let her rest. Not yet. He rolled her gently onto her back, hovering above her with an intense fire in his eyes. "You're not done," he said with a devilish grin, brushing sweaty strands of hair from her face. "Not until I've given you everything." Before she could respond, he stood at the edge of the bed, gripping her ankles and pulling her toward him until her legs dangled over the edge. He knelt between her thighs, his gaze never leaving hers, then leaned in, his mouth diving back between her legs without hesitation. She screamed. Her clit was still sensitive, overstimulated, but Vasper didn't stop. He devoured her, lips and tongue working mercilessly, consuming her as though he couldn't get enough. And he couldn't. Her taste was addictive, her moans a drug, her body the altar where he worshipped. She writhed, trying to pull away, but his strong hands gripped her thighs tight, spreading her wide, locking her in place. His tongue flicked faster, his fingers slipped back inside her, and her body betrayed her, building again, faster than she thought possible. "Vasper, please, I can't," she gasped, her voice cracking. "Yes, you can," he growled, licking her harder. "You will. Give me everything." And she did. She came again, legs shaking violently, her back arching off the bed as her scream echoed through the room. But Vasper didn't stop. He kept going, lapping up every drop, dragging another orgasm from her trembling body before her second one even ended. By the time he finally pulled back, she was limp, her chest heaving, her body slick with sweat and pleasure. Her voice was hoarse, her fingers gripping the sheets like she was holding on to reality. But Vasper wasn't finished. He flipped her over onto her stomach, gently, but with authority. Then he pulled her hips up, placing a pillow under her belly. Her ass lifted perfectly for him, and he dragged his fingers along her spine, watching the goosebumps rise. He lined himself up behind her, his cock rock hard again, glistening with her slickness and his own release. "This position," he growled, leaning over her back, kissing the nape of her neck, "lets me go deeper than ever." And then he thrust inside her in one powerful stroke. She cried out, her body jolting forward, but his arms wrapped around her waist, holding her in place. He began pounding her, slow at first, then faster, his hips slamming into her with each thrust. The sound of skin on skin filled the room, raw and primal. Every thrust was a declaration, every stroke deeper, harder, hungrier. His hand reached under her body again, this time not just to play with her clit, but to command it, rubbing her in perfect rhythm with each punishing thrust. Her moans turned into sobs of pleasure. She'd never been taken like this, so utterly consumed. Her body was on fire, and Vasper was the inferno. She clawed at the sheets, trying to ground herself, but he leaned over her, whispering filth and adoration in her ear. "You love being fucked like this, my love? You love how I ruin you?" "Yes. Yes, fuck, yes," she screamed, her voice high and broken. She came again. Harder than any time before, her body convulsing. And this time Vasper didn't last. Her pulsing walls milked him mercilessly. And with a deep, guttural growl, he buried himself inside her to the hilt. And released, his essence flooding into her once more. They collapsed together. Their bodies trembling. Soaked in sweat and bliss. Still locked in the most intimate of embraces. Vasper wrapped himself around her protectively, placing soft kisses along her spine as she trembled in his arms. "Did we go too far?" he whispered, his voice raw and deep. She laughed weakly, turning her head to the side to look at him. Her eyes were heavy, but glowing. "No. We just found out how far we can go." Vasper kissed her shoulder, nuzzled against her neck, and pulled the blanket over their entwined bodies. Hour passed. Shantis stumbled as she tried to take a step. Her legs trembling, thighs still quivering from the storm they'd just weathered in the bedroom. Her breath hitched when she leaned on the wall for support, her body aching from the delicious torment of Vasper's relentless passion. But before she could take another shaky step, strong arms gently scooped her up from behind. "I got you," Vasper whispered against her ear, the warmth of his breath sending another ripple through her worn-out body. He carried her bridal style through the hallway of the yacht, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, his chest rising with pride. There was no shame in his expression, only satisfaction and pride in how completely she had surrendered to him. "You're glowing," he said with a grin, looking at her like a man utterly enthralled by his wife. "And I love it when you can't walk straight after I've made love to you." She chuckled, burying her face against his neck. "You're proud of yourself, aren't you?" "Absolutely," he replied, chuckling along. "And I'm just getting started." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden blush over the ocean's surface, Vasper settled Shanti down on the cozy seat in their outdoor dining area. The table was elegantly set with warm lights above them and a gentle breeze kissing their skin. He had cooked a special dinner. Grilled sea bass with lemon butter sauce, roasted vegetables, and wine chilled to perfection. "I thought I'd spoil you a little more tonight," he said, carefully feeding her a forkful of tender fish. "You already did," she teased with a sultry smile, and they both burst into laughter. Even when she tried to move, Vasper wouldn't let her. Wherever she needed to go. Inside the yacht, on the deck, even just to turn toward the sea. He carried her in his arms, treating her like the most precious treasure. She kept teasing him, playfully punching his chest as he refused to let her walk. Their laughter echoed over the waves, carried by the night wind. Later, when the moonlight reflected off the gentle ripples of the ocean, and the stars scattered like diamonds in the sky, they entered the glass-paneled shower room. Steam rose instantly as hot water sprayed from the rain-style showerhead above, misting over their skin. Vasper stood behind her under the cascading water, arms wrapping around her slick body. He guided her gently beneath the flow, kissing the nape of her neck as water ran between their heated bodies. His fingers trailed down her stomach, making her gasp as he found her clit again. His touch so feather-light it drove her mad. Shanti clutched the glass wall, her wet hair plastered to her back, moaning breathlessly as Vasper's lips nibbled and sucked on her earlobe. He whispered, "Do you still want more, my love?" "Yes," she whimpered, unable to resist the heat coiling again inside her. "I want everything." Vasper gently turned her, her back against his chest. One arm wrapped around her waist as the other continued to play with her clit, fingers circling and stroking in tortuously slow motions. She bucked against him, and that's when he slid into her from behind, spooning her upright, his chest pressed to her wet back. The angle was perfect. Deep, intense, every slow thrust hitting her in that spot that made her cry out. Made her legs go weak again. He matched each deep stroke with firm, precise pressure on her clit, sending bolts of pleasure through her core. She was trembling, water dripping from her breasts as her moans filled the steamy space. She reached behind to clutch at Vasper's thigh, barely holding herself upright, lost in the dizzying ecstasy he was building inside her. "You're so perfect like this," Vasper growled into her ear, pounding her with controlled power, his wet hand never leaving that sensitive bud. Her body tensed, shaking violently as she neared the edge once more. "Vasper, I can't," she cried out, overwhelmed. "Yes, you can. Let go, love. Let me take you there again." And just like that, she shattered in his arms. She screamed, his thrusts relentless and deep, until he too was pushed over the edge, groaning low in his throat as he released inside her. Their bodies locked together, skin to skin, trembling under the warmth of the shower, their breathing heavy and synced like a rhythm only they could dance to. The sun peeked gently through the sheer curtains of the master suite, casting a golden glow over the room. The soft sway of the yacht cradled their bodies as they lay tangled in white sheets, skin against skin, heat still lingering from the night before. She stirred first, eyes fluttering open. Her thighs ached deliciously, a reminder of how Vasper had unraveled her in the shower just hours ago. She winced slightly as she moved, still sore, still marked, but even that pain pulsed with pleasure. She smiled. Vasper was already awake beside her, his eyes dark with mischief, his fingers lightly tracing circles over her inner thigh. "Good morning, my love," he whispered, his voice thick with hunger. "Morning," she replied with a sleepy, teasing moan. "You feel that ache between your legs?" he asked, his palm sliding upward, grazing her mound, not touching her clit, just close enough to make her breath catch. "I made that." She bit her lip, her thighs instinctively spreading just slightly, inviting him. "I want to taste you again," he growled, sitting up and pulling her gently up with him. Before she could reply, he had scooped her up and walked over to the wide leather chair by the window. He sat down with her straddling him briefly, but only to reposition her, then gently pushed her back, laying her flat across the length of the chair, her legs dangling over the side. He knelt in front of her, prying her thighs apart slowly, reverently, like unveiling something sacred. Her slickness already glistened under the morning light, drawing a dark, wicked grin from his lips. "You're already wet," he murmured, dragging the tip of his tongue along the crease of her thigh. Then, he began. Slowly, excruciatingly slow. His tongue flattened against her folds, licking up the length of her slit with a moan of worship. Then he suckled gently, just once, on her clit, his lips tucking it into his mouth before releasing it with a wet, sinful pop. She gasped, her hips arching up, but he held her in place with firm hands, keeping her down as his tongue flicked lightly, teasing. "You like when I do this?" he murmured against her, his breath warm. Then he suckled again, harder this time, his tongue circling, flattening, then spearing into her tight entrance, before dragging back up to focus on her clit. His hands spread her wider, fingers grazing her trembling thighs as he continued. Slow, torturous worship. "Vasper, fuck." She whimpered, her fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. But he just laughed darkly and sucked her harder, flicking his tongue rapidly now, up and down, side to side, then slow again, building her up, denying her the peak. She thrashed, moaning shamelessly, hips grinding against his face. But he never stopped, never gave in. His tongue was relentless, his lips suckling her clit over and over, driving her insane with every pass. Her body burned, twisted, screamed for more, and he gave it to her, bit by bit, until she was trembling uncontrollably. But he didn't let her finish. Not yet. He stood suddenly, lifting her like she weighed nothing. She gasped as he carried her to the bed, her legs still spread, her body tingling with need. Then he positioned her. He knelt on the mattress, facing the headboard, and lifted her onto him. Her back hit the headboard, arms spread out to either side as he wrapped her legs around his waist and held her up. His arms locked under her thighs. She was suspended, open, exposed, completely at his mercy. "Hold on to the rails," he ordered huskily. She gripped the headboard with both hands, moaning when she felt the tip of his cock slide along her soaked folds. Then he thrust into her, deep, all the way. She cried out, her head tilting back, mouth wide open as he began pounding into her. Slow at first, but deep, each stroke pulling loud moans from her lips as her body bounced in his arms. "Vasper!" she screamed, her voice cracking. His knees dug into the mattress, anchoring him as he thrust harder. Faster, the sound of skin slapping echoing in the room. Her legs shook around him, hands clutching the headboard like her life depended on it. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he looked up at her face, wild and unrestrained, her breasts bouncing with every slam of his hips. His grip tightened under her thighs, his biceps bulging, and he fucked her harder. Wild, unhinged, raw. "You're mine," he growled, slamming into her. "Say it. I'm yours. God, Vasper. I'm yours." Their bodies were slick, crashing together in rhythm, the headboard rattling violently. Her climax built again. Faster now. His cock hitting her in just the right place, his grunts syncing with her screams, until, "Come with me," he roared. Shanta's body convulsed, a guttural scream tearing from her throat as her orgasm tore through her. At the same moment, Vasper thrust deep, burying himself to the hilt, groaning into her neck as he released, their bodies trembling violently together. They clung to each other, panting, drenched in sweat and pleasure. Her legs still locked around him, his arms still under her thighs, both of them shaking. The morning sun washed over them, and still, they didn't let go. Their bodies were trembling, spent, exhausted, floating in the aftermath of pure, wild passion. Vasper held her against the headboard a little longer, not just to steady her trembling legs but to savor the feeling of her still wrapped around him, still pulsing gently in the aftershocks of their shared climax. Her forehead was pressed to his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck, and her arms limp around his shoulders, too drained to move. "Breathe," he whispered softly. "I got you." She gave a soft, tired laugh, still catching her breath. Her legs were trembling uncontrollably. "I can't feel my legs," she murmured with a small smile, her voice hoarse from all the moaning and screaming. "I know." Vasper chuckled softly, kissing the top of her head, his chest rising and falling heavily. "Let me take care of you." With careful precision and pure tenderness, he slowly loosened his arms from beneath her thighs. Her legs slid down his hips weakly as he guided her downward, still pressed close, his strong arms supporting every inch of her body. He shifted, gently turning them sideways so he could lay her down softly on the warm bed. He cradled her against the pillows, brushing damp strands of hair away from her flushed cheeks. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, lips parted, eyes still glazed with pleasure. She looked like a goddess completely wrecked by love, and he couldn't tear his gaze away. "You okay?" he asked gently, brushing the back of his fingers against her cheek. She nodded slowly, her lips curving into a dreamy smile. "I don't think I'll ever walk again." Vasper laughed again, his voice deep and proud. You say that, like it's a bad thing. Then he bent down, pressing a soft, lingering kiss on her lips. It was different from earlier, this one was full of warmth. Adoration, a quiet promise. He pulled back and kissed her collarbone. Then the soft swell of her breast, trailing light, reverent kisses down her body. I'm gonna draw you a warm bath, he murmured. Then I'll cook breakfast. You're not lifting a finger today, my love. And if I want to? She teased, eyes barely open. Then I'll carry you, he said with a wink. Everywhere. Shanti giggled tiredly, her heart swelling. With one final kiss on her temple, Vasper stood up, tucking the sheet gently over her bare body. She sighed contentedly as he moved to the bathroom, naked. Unapologetic, muscles glistening with sweat, hair a wild mess of tangled black strands. Her eyes followed him like he was art in motion. Moments later, the sound of running water echoed from the bathroom. The scent of bath oil and steam began to fill the suite. Vasper returned and carefully scooped her into his arms again, lifting her bridal style from the bed. Still can't walk, she whispered. Good. He smirked, kissing her shoulder as he carried her into the bathroom. Means I did something right. After her long, soothing shower, Shanti stepped out of the glass enclosure, droplets still clinging to her glistening skin. The moment her bare feet touched the cool floor, Vasper was already there, waiting. Without a word, he swept her up into his arms, effortlessly lifting her as if she weighed nothing. He carried her toward the vanity mirror at the foot of their grand bed, his movements fluid and controlled, like a man who owned time itself. She wore a pristine white bathrobe, its plush fabric embroidered with the name Mondragon on the left breast. Everything in the suite, the towels, the pillows, the blankets, bore the same mark, regal and permanent, as if the entire world belonged to them. I was planning to cook for you, Vasper said, his voice low and thoughtful. Eyes locked on her face as he gently sat her down at the edge of the bed. He reached out, brushing a few wet strands of hair from her cheek, tucking them delicately behind her ear. His thumb lingered at her temple before moving to her damp hair, his fingers moving with slow grace as he began to comb through it with quiet tenderness. But didn't we agree yesterday that we'd head to Paris today? He continued, his voice calm but laced with warmth. His eyes twinkled, watching her through the mirror's reflection, the corners of his lips tugging into a knowing smirk. Although, he added, his tone dipping playfully, you still can't walk properly. His voice was teasing, but gentle. Her legs, still trembling from their wild escapade hours earlier, refused to fully cooperate. So, instead, we'll stop by the Orium Sanctum first, he promised, fingers still running through her hair. 20 minutes, that's all it takes. You'll feel better. You'll be able to walk again. She stared at him in the mirror. Her lips curled into a soft, bashful smile, but her cheeks were dusted with a deep blush. She couldn't help it. His suggestion, however practical, made her pulse race. After everything they did last night, she knew why she couldn't walk. And it wasn't just passion, it was Vasper. His intensity, his hunger, the way he made love to her like a beast driven by obsession. It had left her legs weak, her body aching deliciously. Their eyes met in the mirror, hers glowing with shyness and something deeper, and his, well, his gaze held pure mischief. She tried to stand, her legs unsteady. Vasper caught her immediately, strong arms steadying her, and before she could protest, he lifted her again, this time stealing a kiss from her lips. The contact was electric, his mouth warm and possessive. In the next instant, the world shifted. With a flash of golden light and the faint crackle of energy, they vanished and reappeared inside the Orium Sanctum healing bath, deep within the majestic palace of Volantis Noctum. She gasped, No matter how many times they did it, it never stopped to amaze her. One blink, and the world around them changed entirely. It reminded her that Vasper wasn't just a man. He was a creature of power, magic, and wonder. She had married someone who lived beyond the rules of human reality. And he was hers. Vasper gently set her down on the glowing crystal floor. Then, with a casual flick of his hand, he slipped the belt from her robe and let the garment fall from her shoulders. It fluttered like silk in the air before landing on the floor behind her. Now completely bare, Shanta stood in her full glory beneath the soft light of the healing sanctuary. To enter the bath, one had to be naked, so that the healing liquid gold, infused with essences, crystals, and ancient pulsing energies, could reach the very soul. Just as she was about to descend into the bath, Vasper caught her wrist. His eyes flared with desire. He pulled her toward him in a swift motion and captured her lips in a kiss full of craving. Then his mouth moved lower, trailing along her neck, down to her chest. His tongue flicked, teased, tasted her breasts. He groaned as if starved again, utterly consumed by her. She laughed, swatting his arm playfully. "Stop, stop," she whispered, giggling. "We'll end up doing something else again." Still laughing, she stepped down into the bath. The warm, magical liquid gold welcomed her, rising until it reached her neck. Vasper followed her with his eyes, reluctant to let her go, but amused by her resistance. As soon as she submerged, the liquid gold around her began to shift, its hue deepening into a rich, glowing violet. It shimmered like starlight, swirling around her body. The bath reacted to what her body needed, detecting tension, strain, and stress. The deeper the shade, the more intense the healing process. She let out a relaxed sigh, floating in bliss. Across from her, Vasper leaned against the edge of the bath, arms folded, eyes never leaving her. She grinned at him, tempted to tease him again, but held back. He might just jump in and finish what he started. And honestly, she wanted that too. But she also wanted to go to Paris, and if she gave in now, they'd never leave this place. He smiled back, but in his eyes was that same dangerous glint, one full of naughty promises. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the sensations take over. Like invisible hands kneading every muscle in her body, vibrations pulsed through her skin, into her bones. A tingling warmth spread through her, and the scent of the bath filled her senses. It smelled divine, like vanilla wrapped in roses, orchids, and something warm and addictive she couldn't quite name. She moaned softly, her body completely at peace. Then, a flicker of motion. She opened her eyes and saw Vasper walking to the small bar near the lounge chair at the side of the chamber. She watched his every move, the way his muscles shifted beneath the cling of his simple gray t-shirt and beach shorts. He poured deep red wine into a golden glass, his fingers elegant, precise. Gods, he was too handsome. She couldn't stop staring. Powerful, regal, commanding. No wonder Samara and Zalora had both fallen for him so hard. But they had failed to win his heart. She had succeeded. He was hers now. And she would never take that for granted. As he returned to her side, glass in hand, one hand casually in his pocket, she felt her heart skip again. He was devastatingly handsome. The very reason she could barely walk right now. She tried to hide her smile, but the sparkle in her eyes betrayed her. And Vasper noticed. He glanced at the dragon-etched wall clock. An enchanted piece, its eyes blinking like a living creature. "Less than 15 minutes," he said, his voice low and teasing. Then his gaze flicked back to her, those wicked eyes brimming with heat. "And after that, we'll finish what we started. Over there," he added, pointing to the lavish velvet bed at the far end of the chamber. Shanty bit her lip, blushing furiously. She giggled, unable to hide her reaction. Even after all this time, Vasper's dirty talk still made her feel like a schoolgirl. Nervous, giddy, and hopelessly aroused. She followed his gaze to the bed. Her heart fluttered. A part of her wanted to laugh, but her body stirred with anticipation. She could already feel it. That familiar ache, that craving only he could satisfy. And then, something magical happened. The liquid gold surrounding her shifted once more, turning a delicate shade of pink. Her eyes widened. She hadn't seen that color before. Vasper chuckled under his breath. He knew exactly what it meant. The bath reacted to more than just pain, it detected desire. Pure, unfiltered, sensual longing. He didn't say a word, just kept watching her, savoring the innocent surprise on her face. It turned him on even more. Her unawareness. Her raw honesty. Her blush. She looked up at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "What?" she asked. Vasper just grinned. And beneath that grin was a wolf, ready to pounce. Vasper slowly sipped his wine, his gaze never leaving her, who now submerged her entire body, head and all, into the glowing golden bath. The color of the liquid began to shift, slowly transforming back to a rich, radiant gold, a signal that the session was nearing its end and her body had completely healed. Shanta lingered for several more seconds before resurfacing, her glistening form rising like a golden goddess reborn from her divine sanctuary. She stood and stepped toward the stairs of the bath, her eyes locked with Vasper's. The way he looked at her, like a ravenous lion watching his prey, sent a thrill through her entire body. The liquid gold clung to every inch of her skin, coating her like a second skin, gleaming under the ethereal lighting of the healing chamber. Even her hair shimmered with the golden essence, giving her the aura of a celestial being. Her body felt light, pain-free, deeply relaxed and whole, as if her flesh and spirit were kissed by serenity itself. As she reached him, Vasper immediately pulled her into a tight embrace, his strong arms wrapping around her possessively. Without a word, he grabbed her hand and led her swiftly toward the crystal glass shower nearby, unable to hide the urgency building in him. Shanti giggled, her laughter echoing softly in the chamber as her golden footprints trailed behind her. Once inside the shower, Vasper turned the dial and a gentle rain poured from above. The soft droplets caressed her skin, washing away the golden liquid that melted and trickled into the glowing crystal drain. From behind, Vasper pressed his body against hers, his hands already exploring her form, one sliding up her neck while the other cupped and caressed her breasts. He worshipped them, massaging and gently pinching her already sensitive nipples, making her moan breathlessly. His mouth soon followed, enveloping one aching bud as his tongue teased and played, sending delicious shocks of pleasure through her. Shanta's hands threaded into his soaked hair, pressing his mouth harder against her. Unable to get enough, one of his hands slipped down, sliding between her thighs, his fingers skillfully finding her clit, circling and teasing before plunging inside her slick, eager heat. Her hips bucked involuntarily, and her moans became deeper, more desperate. Now both of them were drenched, water cascading down their bodies as their breathing grew heavier and more erratic. Shanti, caught in a wave of need, reached up and began pulling Vasper's drenched t-shirt off his body. As she lifted it, she peppered his sculpted chest with kisses, even nipping him playfully, earning a smirk from him. The moment his shirt hit the floor, their eyes locked again. But just as their gaze met, his fingers returned to her clit, making her gasp out loud in sweet agony. Vasper watched her face intently, savoring every expression. Meanwhile, Shanta's hand slid down into the waistband of his shorts, fingers grazing the massive hardness confined beneath his briefs. She stroked him, slow and deliberate, and Vasper groaned, his entire body reacting to her touch. He was already rock-hard and twitching, and when Shanta finally pushed past the last layer and wrapped her slick hand around his length, moving it up and down, Vasper nearly lost control. With a single motion, Shanta stripped him of both shorts and briefs. They dropped to his feet with a soft slap against the wet floor. Vasper, unable to resist any longer, shut off the water. Then, without hesitation, she knelt before him, eyes blazing with hunger and worship. She took him into her mouth with one smooth motion, moaning as she began to pleasure him with fervent, worshipful devotion. Water dripped from her chin as she bobbed her head, her hands stroking what her mouth couldn't reach. Vasper's groans filled the steamy chamber, his head thrown back in ecstasy. Grabbing a handful of her hair, he guided her rhythm with raw, dominant power. Then he paused, pulling her head back just enough to look into her flushed face. His voice was hoarse, but full of reverence. "You're so beautiful, my love," he murmured, staring straight into her eyes. Shanti moaned in response, her lips parted, hands still stroking his shaft in slow, teasing motions. Vasper deliberately let a trail of spit fall from his mouth, directly into hers, and she caught it with her tongue, licking her lips seductively. The act ignited something wild in Vasper. Growling low in his throat, he suddenly scooped her up into his arms. She gasped as he carried her out of the shower, kissing her with ferocious passion, like the world had disappeared and only she remained. "You drive me insane," he whispered into her lips, his tongue demanding entry. And she responded with a deep, needy moan. "Yes, always. Vasper, I will," she replied breathlessly, her words melting into another moan, as his hand slid back between her thighs, playing her like a sensual instrument, his fingers dancing over her clit as his lips worshipped hers. When he finally released her lips, she gasped for air, feeling like he had drawn the breath straight from her lungs. His mouth moved to her neck, nipping and sucking as her moans deepened, her hips thrusting toward his hand, desperate for more. Then his mouth reached her breasts once more, devouring them with lustful hunger. Licking, teasing, suckling. It was as if he was trying to drink the very essence of her. Through her sensitive peaks, she writhed beneath his touch, her fingers digging into his back, lost in the firestorm of desire he ignited inside her. Her cries of pleasure filled the room, wild and unrestrained, her body trembling as if it would break apart. She was losing her mind. She needed him, needed Vasper inside her. Her body was begging, aching, pleading for him with every fiber of its being. And then Vasper's mouth traveled lower, down the smooth plane of her stomach, his tongue tasting every drop of her skin, until he reached the place where his own hand had rested moments ago. She was soaked, slick, hot, and utterly drenched in desire. And Vasper wasn't about to waste a single drop of her. The moment his lips reached her lower abdomen, Shanti gasped. "Vasper!" she cried out. He responded not with words, but with a firm squeeze to her breast, and a deep thrust of his fingers into her aching core, making her arch violently with a guttural moan. Her hips lifted off the bed, but Vasper caught her ass in his hands, holding her up with strength and hunger. And then, he devoured her, his mouth pressed against her slick folds, his tongue working fast and greedy, licking and lapping like a man starving for her. He explored her with precision, flicking, circling, stroking with ravenous desire as he cleaned every drop from her thighs and folds, before focusing on the center of her heat. She was moaning uncontrollably, clutching the sheets as Vasper lifted her hips even higher, keeping her in place while he feasted on her without mercy. His eyes were locked on her body, the heaving of her chest, the arch of her back, the bliss twisted in her expression as she writhed under his tongue. He had no reason to hold back now. He wanted everything from her. She was driving him insane. wild, unhinged, and completely addicted. His strong hands gripped her thighs and buttocks tightly, leaving flushed marks as he pinned her open, his fingers digging into her soft flesh, while his tongue zeroed in on her clit. Shanta's thighs trembled violently, her breathing ragged, her body clenching as she neared the edge. And when Vasper began sucking her swollen clit with maddening rhythm, speeding up with every flick and pull, she exploded. Her thighs convulsed, her back arched high. A cry so primal tore from her throat as her climax washed over her, her entire body twitching, shivering, lost in waves of pleasure. But Vasper didn't stop. His tongue stayed in place, gently tasting, flicking, savoring her release while watching her like she was the most sacred thing he'd ever seen. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Lips parted, eyes shut tight, face frozen in pure ecstasy. He felt every tremor through his tongue, felt every spark of her orgasm down to the last electric twitch of her thighs. He licked her slowly now, deliberately savoring the nectar that poured from her. Then, with a look of deep, reverent love, Vasper slowly lowered her trembling body back down to the bed. But he didn't give her a chance to catch her breath. The tip of his long, rock-hard cock pressed against her soaked entrance, and he pushed inside, slowly, deeply, watching her face contort in sweet, delicious agony. She looked up at him, her eyes full of desire, and let out a long moan as he filled her inch by inch. And when he finally bottomed out, when he was buried to the hilt, her back arched again, another cry tearing from her lips. Vasper groaned, the sound thick and deep in his throat, as he leaned down and began thrusting into her without pause, his mouth latching onto her breasts. He suckled, switching from one nipple to the other, licking and tugging while his hips pounded into her. Slow, deep, devastating strokes. She was tight, hot, and dripping wet, and she clenched around him like a vice, pulling him deeper with every thrust. Vasper growled low in his throat, as her hips met his rhythm, bucking up to meet every single one of his powerful thrusts. He released her breast and immediately claimed her mouth, their lips crashing together in desperate hunger. Tongues tangled, sucked, pulled, like they were devouring each other's breath, stealing each other's souls. Her hands clawed at his solid back, her nails dragging down his skin, needing more. And then, Vasper hooked both of Shanta's legs over his arms, holding her wide open as he braced himself on his elbows, diving deeper than ever before. She whimpered against his lips, unable to speak, her cries of ecstasy muffled as he thrust harder, faster. Her sounds became high-pitched, frantic, lost in the overwhelming pleasure as their bodies chased the edge together. Their breathing was ragged. The pace grew relentless. And then, together, they shattered. Guttural moans tore from both of them, as Vasper slammed deep inside her one final time and came hard, emptying everything he had into her pulsing walls. He stayed buried, twitching inside her, his arms trembling as he held himself above her. Her body shook beneath him, her thighs quivering, breath stuttering as the aftershocks rolled through her. Even when the orgasm passed, he didn't move. He stayed still, locked deep inside her. Their bodies melded as one. Their mouths moved again, this time slow, tender, passion still lingering but softened by love. "You drive me insane, my love. I love you so much," Vasper whispered against her lips, voice hoarse and filled with awe. "You drive me crazy. I can't get enough of you. I'm just as crazy about you, Vasper. I love you more than anything," she murmured breathlessly. She tried to move her legs from his arms, muscles trembling and sore, but Vasper simply smiled and gently lowered them for her, careful and affectionate. Still, He didn't pull out. He stayed right there inside her, as if he never wanted to leave. Inside his sleek, black flying vehicle that hovered above the island's airspace, Vladimir Mondragon sat in the pilot's seat, but his attention was fixated on the monitor mounted beside the controls. The screen showed the live surveillance feed from one of the yacht's hidden cameras. He shouldn't have looked, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. And there she was, Shanti, his forbidden obsession, naked, glowing like a goddess beneath the warm golden light of the bathroom. Her wet hair clung to her skin, her thighs parted, her body trembling in sheer ecstasy. Vasper's head was buried between her legs, worshipping her, devouring her, owning her in the way Vladimir had only dared dream about. Vladimir's jaw clenched, his fists trembling on the armrest. He had no right to feel this, no right to ache like this. But fuck, how could he not? His breath quickened as the scene played out on screen. Shanta's moans echoed faintly through the speakers, her back arching, eyes fluttering shut, mouth open in pleasure as Vasper made love to her like a man possessed. Every thrust, every cry, every kiss, they pierced into Vladimir like blades. He felt like his soul was being ripped apart. Jealousy burned in his chest, but so did desire. His cock was rock hard under his pants, straining with painful need. But it wasn't the two beautiful women waiting in his grand suite that haunted his thoughts. It was her, Shanti. Every inch of her skin, the way she cried Vasper's name, the way she came. He slammed the screen off with a growl, stood, and stormed out of the cockpit. In the grand chamber of his private estate, two stunning women awaited him, Mira and Sila, handpicked elite escorts trained to please and obey. The room was dim, lit only by flickering flames from the massive fireplace. Silken curtains swayed gently as the night wind kissed the open balcony. Vladimir entered like a beast, eyes dark, body radiating raw heat. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The women approached, their lithe bodies wrapped in nothing but sheer fabric, eyes filled with lust and submission. They felt the energy pouring off him. Agony, hunger, fury. And it ignited something primal in them. Vladimir sat on the velvet couch, spreading his legs. "Get on your knees," he commanded. Mira knelt first, lips parting as she pulled down his pants, revealing his long and thick, throbbing cock. Veins pulsing, tip already slick. Sila moved behind him, hands on his shoulders, kissing down his neck as her fingers dug into his chest. But in his mind, it wasn't them. It was her. Always her. He grabbed Mira by the hair and thrust himself into her mouth without warning, making her gag as he forced himself deeper, his hips rolling like waves crashing with fury. She moaned, choking and drooling, while he used her throat, like he was trying to punish it. Behind him, Sila kissed her way down his spine, then joined, her tongue licking the base of his cock as Mira sucked the head. The sight was obscene, a god being worshipped by two flawless bodies. But Vladimir's mind was torturing him. He closed his eyes and all he could see was Shanti, her trembling thighs, her moaning lips, the way Vasper made her body sing. "Fuck," he growled, standing and dragging the two women with him. He threw Mira on the bed, her legs spread wide, and plunged into her without hesitation. She screamed in pleasure as he rammed deep, his hips slamming into her again and again with ruthless force. At the same time, he pulled Sila onto his face, tongue spearing into her soaked core, while his cock destroyed Mira beneath him. But his heart, it was breaking. "Say her name," he whispered against Sila's heat. "Who?" she moaned, confused and breathless. He grabbed her ass tightly, thrusting his tongue harder, Say Shanty. And when she did, when both women began to moan that forbidden name, he lost himself. He flipped Scylla over, impaling her from behind, while Mira straddled his face now, riding his tongue, moaning like she was being possessed. It was chaos. Skin slapping, tongues moaning, the bed shaking violently. He shifted again. Mira beneath him now, Scylla straddling his back. He fucked her from below while Scylla kissed his neck, scratching his chest, whispering nonsense into his ear. But none of it reached his soul. Only Shanty. Only her. His rhythm grew erratic. Fast, brutal. Like he wanted to fuck the pain out of his body, the ache out of his chest. His thrusts became animalistic. He grunted, groaned, every muscle taut as he neared the edge. Shanty. He groaned as he slammed into Mira with one final, bone-deep thrust. His body stiffened. He came hard, erupting deep inside her, while Scylla kissed and stroked him through it. But it was her name on his lips. Not theirs. Never theirs. He collapsed back. The two women clinging to him, their bodies hot and breathless. But Vladimir stared blankly at the ceiling, heart pounding in agony, mind reeling with images of Shanty. His body was spent, but his soul, still tormented, still cursed to crave something he could never touch, still in love with the woman he was never meant to have. The candlelight still flickered softly in the vast grand room, the scent of sex thick in the air. Mira and Scylla lay tangled beside him, breathless, their skin glistening with sweat, satisfied beyond reason. But Vladimir? He was cold again, staring into the shadows of the ceiling, breathing slow, steady, calculated. He reached for his wine glass, took a slow sip of the blood-red vintage. Its taste, rich and bitter, perfectly matching the venom in his chest. No more emotions, only precision now. He stood up, naked and unbothered, walking to the balcony, overlooking the ocean, his gaze fixated on a tiny speck of light in the distance. The yacht. He exhaled slowly. Then a twisted, dangerous smile ghosted his lips. You really have lost your mind, Vladimir, he murmured to himself. He turned his head slightly, watching the two women stir in the sheets. Get dressed, he ordered softly. Both women jolted, sensing a shift in energy. A chill, a command cloaked in silk. You're sending us away? Mira asked, confused, clutching the sheet to her chest. Yes, Vladimir said, buttoning up his black silk shirt, every movement smooth and exact. Go home. He turned to them, eyes gleaming like ice. His jaw clenched slightly at the thought of Shanty, but his voice remained smooth. It was 9 a.m. in Paris. The sun bathed the city in golden light, its gentle rays spilling across the rooftops like liquid honey. Inside an exclusive 5-star restaurant perched at the top of a luxury skyscraper, facing the Eiffel Tower, the morning air was crisp and serene. It wasn't just any restaurant, it was a sanctuary in the clouds, reserved for the ultra-elite. Only a few were seated, and even fewer were speaking. The atmosphere was calm, almost sacred. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a breathtaking view of the Parisian skyline. The Eiffel Tower stood tall in the distance, framed by soft morning mist and kissed by sunlight. Velvet chairs and white linen tables glistened with morning dew from the open balcony. Crystal chandeliers above glittered in the daylight like diamonds, and the air was laced with the scent of fresh French blooms and warm croissants. Shanty sat by the window, glowing. Her face was lit by the morning sun, her smile delicate and dreamy as she gazed at the Eiffel Tower. Across from her, Vasper sat silently, her hand in his. His lips pressed gently to her fingers, as if grounding himself in her touch. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her. Always her. On the table were 2 elegant wine glasses filled with freshly pressed orange mimosa. They were waiting for their breakfast order, which had been personally requested in advance by Vasper. Only the most exquisite morning meal Paris could offer. But in the middle of that golden stillness, Shanta's gaze shifted. Her smile remained, but her eyes grew distant. A breeze swept across the balcony and brushed against her cheek like a whisper from the past. And just like that, her thoughts drifted to another morning long ago. A different place. A different man. Jake. Vasper felt it. He always did. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly as he studied her. Why? He asked gently, his voice a low whisper that floated between them. His gaze was locked onto hers, then slowly slid to her lips. Shanti blinked, almost startled. Her eyes met his. Surprised by the way he could read her so easily. She gave a soft, apologetic smile. But her eyes still shimmered with that far-off look. Nothing, she said. Just remembered something, that's all. Vasper nodded slowly, still holding her hand. He began playing with her fingers, brushing his thumb over the rings on her delicate hand. The red and the first engagement ring, the pink diamond and the wedding ring. The veil of eternity nestled on her left finger, while the second engagement ring, the celestial bond, now adorned her right. He touched them reverently, tracing the shape of each gem as if they were sacred. Shanta's gaze dropped to their hands, his touch tender yet grounding. Then he asked, barely above a breath, "Did you and Jake eat here too?" Shanti froze for a second. He knew. He always knew. Could he read her thoughts now just by the way her expression changed? "Vasper, why would you ask that?" she asked, forcing a soft chuckle. "That's not what I was thinking." But her eyes darted away, toward the mimosa glass. She wasn't good at lying. Vasper gave a quiet laugh, his eyes never leaving her. He lifted her hand once more and kissed it tenderly. "It's all right." His voice was like velvet. "You don't have to answer." Their breakfast arrived shortly after, an event in itself. 2 waiters in black and white uniforms approached with trays carrying the finest morning cuisine Paris could offer. Vasper's plate held truffle-infused scrambled eggs with foie gras toast, gold leaf-dusted croissants, and fresh figs soaked in champagne. For Shanti, a delicate lobster benedict with a saffron hollandaise, plated like edible art, accompanied by a glass plate of rose-petal pancakes, lightly caramelized at the edges and topped with rare alpine strawberries. Shanta's eyes widened in wonder. "This is breakfast?" She laughed softly. Her first bite of the benedict made her eyes flutter closed. "Oh my God. It's like velvet melting in my mouth." Vasper didn't touch his food at first. He just watched her. Her joy, her wonder. It fed something deeper in him. All around, the quiet restaurant stirred with quiet curiosity. Every guest there was someone powerful or influential. Yet their eyes drifted toward the couple by the window. Shanti, with her golden brown hair tied in a soft high ponytail, wore tight black jeans and a crisp white button-down shirt tucked neatly into her waist, highlighting the elegant curve of her hourglass figure. Her skin glowed in the morning sun. The red and pink diamonds on her fingers shimmered with every flick of her hand, catching the light like fire. Vasper sat in all black. A sleek polo shirt, tight black jeans, and dark boots. His hair was tied in a half-man bun, exposing his sharp jawline and striking features. There was something about him. An unshakable calm, an untouchable power. That made everyone instinctively aware. This man wasn't ordinary. They are king and queen having breakfast. Whispers floated across the room. "She's stunning, just look at her." "Who is he?" "He looks dangerous and divine." "Her rings, God. Those must be worth millions." Vasper could hear every word. His enhanced hearing picked up even the quietest admiration. But he said nothing. He only smiled softly to himself, watching his wife eat like an angel in front of him, unaware of the countless eyes on her. Then came dessert, yes. Even at breakfast. La Perle du Matin, the most luxurious morning dessert in Paris, arrived. A crystal sugar shell filled with yuzu mousse, lavender cream, and fresh vanilla bean foam, adorned with violet petals and powdered gold. When Shanti broke it open with a delicate spoon, the fragrance alone was intoxicating. Her moan after the first taste sent a jolt down Vasper's spine. I could live in this flavor. She giggled, licking her spoon slowly. Vasper leaned back, smiling like a man enchanted beyond reason. Watching her like that, happy, glowing, alive, was more than enough to make him fall deeper, again and again. They finished their breakfast, and as they rose to leave, the energy in the room shifted once again. Silence. Then murmurs. Then phones quietly lifted. Shanti stood with elegance. Her curves moved with every graceful step, and her beauty, enhanced only by simplicity, was magnetic. Her white polo shirt hugged her just right, her jeans molded to her long legs, and her heels clicked softly on the marble floor. People stared in awe. She was otherworldly. Vasper, still holding her hand, walked beside her. Masculine grace, raw power, and silent confidence radiating with every step. Together, they were a vision that could make gods jealous. Outside, Vasper's car waited. A Bugatti Tourbillon, the newest and most expensive model in Paris. Its low body gleamed in the sunlight, doors lifting like wings as they approached. Gasps rose from the bystanders. Phones clicked. Videos were taken. Vasper gently opened the passenger door and helped Shanti in with great care, his palm at her back, fingers brushing her thigh as she sat down. He closed the door quietly, his gaze never leaving her face. Then he walked to the driver's side, sliding in with effortless grace. As the car purred to life and pulled away, pedestrians stood stunned, watching the machine disappear into the busy street. High above, in a security room watching the building surveillance, a group of women stared at the screens. That woman, she's so lucky, one said. And him. He's like a walking sin. A devil incarnate. You think he keeps her up all night? Laughter followed. The men nearby shook their heads in admiration. He's the kind of guy who'd take a bullet for her, and make love to her like she's made of gold. And just like that, the morning city whispered the tale of a royal couple who had stolen Paris' breath in just one breakfast. Meanwhile, inside the car as Vasper was driving, Shanti sat in silence, her eyes quietly observing the road, the passing cars, and the people walking along the sidewalks. A familiar sense of envy welled up in her again. Envy toward those living simple, carefree lives. Her thoughts were interrupted when she felt Vasper's hand gently squeeze her inner thigh. A sudden shiver rippled through her. And despite his eyes remaining fixed on the road, a playful smile tugged at his lips. The car had come to a full stop at a red light. The traffic frozen in time. The vehicles beside them were also idling. Windows rolled down, and some passengers glanced curiously at Vasper's sleek sports car. Shanti chuckled. "Is this how much you love sports cars?" she asked, turning to face him with an amused smile. Instead of answering with words, Vasper responded by giving her thigh another playful squeeze. "One day, I'll teach you how to drive," he said with a teasing grin. Shanti's eyes lit up with anticipation, her mind instantly drifting off into the idea. She suddenly remembered Vasper's intense race with Jake. A soft laugh escaped her lips at the memory, which Vasper quickly noticed. But before he could comment, the light turned green and he pressed on the gas, guiding the car forward. "Why are you laughing?" he asked casually. "Nothing," Shanti replied, her tone light and evasive. I still don't believe Jake won that race, Vasper said without hesitation. He used teleportation that day. That's the only way he could have beaten me. Shanta's eyes widened, once again surprised by how Vasper seemed to read her mind so effortlessly. Vasper, she exclaimed, half laughing and half frustrated. Why do you always bring up Jake? And besides, he didn't cheat during that race. Her words made Vasper fall silent, the smile slipping from his lips, his expression turning somber. She also fell quiet. That race. They both remembered it vividly. It was a time when she still harbored resentment toward him. So much had changed since then. Out of nowhere, Vasper reached for her hand and brought it to his lips, pressing a soft kiss against her skin. Do you know that, the night you all left, I felt like I was losing my mind, thinking about you, he confessed, his voice low, full of raw sincerity. By now, they had entered a quieter road where only a few cars passed by. Vasper slowly pulled the car over to the side and stopped. Shanta's lips parted slightly, surprised by the unexpected emotion pouring out of him. Vasper, don't bring up the past, she said, her voice trembling. Everything that happened, it was because of your actions. And I don't regret the decision I made when I chose Jake. There was a slight break in her voice. He still has a place in my heart. Time just never gave us the chance we needed. Her gaze softened. Her eyes locked onto Vasper's serious face, the pain clearly visible in his eyes. A faint, bitter laugh escaped from Vasper. I can't believe I'm still jealous of someone who's no longer even alive, he added, pain evident in his voice. Then she confessed. And every time I face Jake, the guilt crushes me, she added, her throat tightening like a thorn had lodged itself there. She knew she didn't need to say it, but she wanted to release what she had long kept buried. When we were together, I was happy. But when I'm alone, it's you who invades my mind, my heart. Her voice trembled. Shame flickered in her expression, as if she wanted to take the words back. But it was too late. They had already escaped her lips, raw and unfiltered. Before she could say another word, Vasper leaned forward and captured her mouth in a kiss, deep, urgent, and possessive. She couldn't speak anymore. His kiss was overpowering, consuming her with a storm of emotions. Pleasure wrapped in punishment. I want to punish you for everything that's happened, he murmured between scorching kisses. And I'll accept your punishment too, my love, for all the pain I caused. His mouth was blazing as he devoured her lips, face, and neck. She was pressed into the seat, helpless under the weight of Vasper's half-body leaning over her, his hands worshipping her with desperation. Vasper, we're still on the side of the road. What are you doing? She gasped. But Vasper's mouth was glued to her neck, savoring every inch of her skin like it was sacred. Vasper only groaned in response, his hands now eagerly fumbling for the button and zipper of her tight jeans. Their breaths grew heavier, their bodies igniting with desire in the confined space of the car. But despite the rush of heat and the overwhelming sensation, she was still aware of their surroundings. They were parked on the roadside. Anyone could see them. She reached for his hand, now inside her jeans, and with a breathless laugh, she pushed him away with all the strength she could muster. Vasper's face pulled back just slightly, his breath hot against her skin, but her hand was still on his chest. He refused to back down, his desire refusing to be tamed. We're on the road, my king, she gasped, breathless from what Vasper had just done to her. Her heart was thundering in her chest as she looked down. Her shirt's buttons were all undone, her jeans half open. She hastily adjusted herself, cheeks flushed, her fingers trembling as she refastened her clothes. But even as she tried to compose herself, her gaze locked on Vasper, who looked like a starving beast devouring her with his eyes. He was devastatingly handsome, and in that raw, carnal moment even more irresistible. They stared at each other for a while, his piercing eyes trailing slowly from her gaze, down to her trembling lips, and finally, to the exposed cleavage she was hurriedly trying to cover up. A teasing smirk played at the corner of her mouth. "Your hands are ridiculously fast," she murmured between breaths, smiling. Vasper didn't speak. Instead, with a wicked gleam in his eyes, he brushed his thumb firmly over her lips. His touch was commanding, possessive, his hand shaking slightly, as if barely containing the wild storm within him. Then, with that same hand, he took hers and guided it onto his lap, right over the solid, pulsing bulge straining against his pants. Shanti wrapped her fingers around it, squeezing gently, and a sultry smile curved her lips. "I love you," Vasper whispered, and with those words, he crashed his lips onto hers in a fervent, consuming kiss. In response, she gripped him tighter through the fabric. He was hard, stone-like, unrelenting. She knew, the moment that thing was unleashed, she wouldn't be able to walk straight again. His punishment always brought her to the peak of ecstasy. A soft, aching moan escaped from both their throats, their lips parting briefly in the heat of their passion. Vasper pulled away slightly and looked down at her hand, still gripping his rock-hard arousal. This belongs to you, my love. It only longs for you," he said in his deep, velvet voice that made her heart skip. She smiled, feeling her cheeks warm. "You better mean that, Vasper. Because now that we're married, I have every right to claim it," she said playfully, though her tone carried a teasing possessiveness. Vasper laughed, a dark, thrilling laugh, and pressed her hand harder against him, his eyes burning into hers as he bit his lip in desire. But then, a car skidded to a stop in front of them. Sharp, deliberate, and loud enough to slice through the thick air of tension. A sleek Rolls-Royce La Rose Noir blocked their path, like a predator claiming its territory. Startled, she pulled her hand away from Vasper and sat up straight, her pulse racing as she stared at the luxury car ahead. Vasper's jaw clenched. One hand gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles whitening. His other hand hovered in the air, caught between restraint and the urge to unleash chaos. "Do you see them?" Shanti whispered, her voice trembling. Through the tinted windshield of the Rolls-Royce, they could make out the silhouettes. 2 people. The driver was a man, and beside him sat a brunette woman. The car's top was down, making their identities even more visible. The man in the passenger seat turned his head slowly toward them. He was undeniably handsome. Sharp jawline, raven black hair swept back, tailored suit hugging his frame like a second skin. A man who radiated power, wealth, and a dangerous calm. No one moved. Vasper stared him down, unmoving, hands still on the wheel, as if waiting for something. Shanti could feel the air around them tightening, thick with unspoken tension. Her stomach twisted in fear. "Vasper, who is he?" "Let's just go," she said softly, placing her hand on his arm, trying to guide him away from the looming confrontation. Vasper didn't speak. He just started the engine of his Bugatti tourbillon. Its growl low, guttural, like a predator waking up. The interior around them pulsed with opulence. Deep blue leather, carbon fiber accents, chrome-trimmed dials, everything whispering power and prestige. Vasper's hands rested firmly on the wheel, relaxed, yet lethal. Every movement was smooth, controlled, like a master orchestrating a symphony of speed and dominance. But the Rolls-Royce wouldn't budge. It blocked the road ahead deliberately, slowly inching sideways to make it clear. They weren't allowed to pass. Shanta's breath hitched. The couple inside the Rolls-Royce looked like a royal pair. Stunning, elegant. But the way they were smiling, it was taunting. Panic stirred in Shanta's chest. "I don't want trouble, Vasper. Please," she whispered. He exhaled through his nose. Clearly irritated, his eyes locked on the man ahead. "Who are they, Vasper?" she asked again, her voice now quaking. "He's one of the racers I beat in Japan," Vasper said flatly. "His name is Daimon Levesque. From the House of Levesque. A powerful family in Europe. I didn't just defeat him in that race. I also stole his girlfriend," Vasper said in a low, almost cruel voice, letting the words linger in the air. But then he scoffed lightly, correcting himself. "Well, not really stole. I didn't snatch her away. His girlfriend. She came to me willingly. She approached me herself at a party, sat right down on my lap on the sofa, started kissing me, grinding against me while moaning loudly for everyone to hear. Right there. In front of him." Vasper's voice deepened with a quiet, dangerous pride as he continued. "And Daimon saw everything. Saw his own girlfriend desperately clinging to me, rubbing herself against me, begging for more, while he could do nothing but watch. From where he sat in the driver's seat." Vasper now stared sharply at Daimon outside, his expression cutting like a blade. He knew Daimon couldn't see inside the car because of the shield. But still, it felt as if their eyes met through the barriers, pure tension radiating between them like a live wire. Shanta's jaw dropped open in pure shock. She turned to Vasper, her heart pounding heavily in her chest, realizing her earlier fears were right all along. This wasn't just about racing anymore. This was personal. Very personal. "You didn't even resist that woman?" she gasped, her voice breaking slightly. "You knew she was Daimon's girlfriend at that time?" she demanded, looking at Vasper as if seeing a different side of him. A side she hadn't yet fully known, even though she hadn't been part of Vasper's life back then. A sharp sting of jealousy twisted painfully inside her chest. Vasper shifted toward her, his rough exterior softening for a moment. His gaze dropped, full of guilt. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "Vasper," she said gently, shaking her head. "You don't owe me an apology," she added, though deep down, she had already forgiven him before he could even finish his apology. She knew she needed to prepare herself for the wild, messy past Vasper carried, especially when it came to other women. She had no choice but to swallow it all whole. "I told you before," Vasper said, his voice low and rough. "I never used to say no to women, especially the beautiful ones who threw themselves at me. That was who I was. I even got a thrill, knowing I could take someone else's woman. It felt like an achievement, a trophy I could claim," he confessed with a heavy, bitter sigh. "My ego, my pride, it fed on that." He turned his head away slightly, exhaling deeply, as if trying to chase away the ghosts of his past. "I'm sorry," he repeated, but this time, his voice cracked slightly. "Because of what he was now dragging her into. Because I've dragged you into something dangerous again." She could only gape at him, staring wide-eyed, her mind spinning, struggling to process all the things Vasper had just confessed. "But don't worry. I'm not going to confront him. We're leaving." He tried to drive forward, but in that split second, the Rolls-Royce lunged. It swerved with chilling precision, cutting them off at the last second, as if daring Vasper to retaliate. Shanti gasped, heart jumping into her throat. But Vasper didn't lose control. With just one hand, he spun the wheel, slipping the Bugatti through a narrow space between the curb. and the Rolls-Royce with almost inhuman reflexes. It was smooth, flawless. Shantis stared at him in awe. The way he handled the car, the confidence. The focus, he was fire in motion. They were just about to escape when more cars appeared. From all directions. They came. 1, 2, 3. Until 6 luxury sports cars boxed them in. Ferraris. McLarens. Lamborghinis surrounding them like vultures. Each one gleamed with menace. Shanta's breath caught. They were trapped. Vasper's jaw clenched. He had no choice. With a long, slow breath, he unlocked the door of his car. The soft mechanical hiss echoing in the heavy tension that smothered the day. Before stepping out, he turned toward Shanti, cupping her face gently. "Whatever happens," he whispered, voice low and commanding, "do not step out of this car. Stay here, no matter what." Shanti, eyes wide and chest rising and falling in quick, panicked breaths, nodded wordlessly. Her hand clutched his sleeve for a moment, as if unwilling to let go. But she obeyed. Vasper closed the door behind him with a soft thunk. And instantly, a wave of movement stirred around them. One by one, the sports car's doors swung open. Men began stepping out. Tall, well-dressed, exuding wealth and arrogance. Their suits screamed money. Their glare screamed violence. And trailing behind them were women. Gorgeous, shapely women in scandalous dresses that barely clung to their flawless bodies. They flocked to one side, clustering together in a spot, murmuring to one another as their eyes drank in Vasper's form. But Vasper stood unbothered. Calm. Dangerous. The unmistakable, smug click of leather soles striking pavement came from the Rolls-Royce. The passenger door opened, and out stepped Daimon Levesque. He wore a black suit sharp enough to slice through the tension in the air. His long brunette-haired girlfriend stepping out after him in a skin-tight crimson dress, clinging to his arm. Daimon didn't look at Vasper. Not yet. Instead, he walked straight to the hood of Vasper's car and leaned both palms on the sleek carbon fiber surface, peering hard at the passenger side window. The tint held strong, but Shanti, inside, felt his stare pierce through the glass. She could barely breathe. Her heart thudded violently in her chest. The interior of the car felt suddenly claustrophobic, despite its luxury. The blue-stitched leather seats, the starry ceiling. The faint hum of the engine still running, pulsing like a heartbeat. Outside, the road was now completely sealed off. 2 cars on each side of the narrow road. They had trapped them. From both ends, Daimon's entourage of men started closing in on Vasper. Some chuckled darkly. One openly lifted his coat to reveal a weapon. A sleek silver pistol tucked in his waistband. A warning. Their steps were exaggerated, cocky, calculated. Their smirks were drawn wide, as if they already knew how the day would end. But Vasper smiled. Not a friendly smile. A twisted, cocky curl of the lips that dripped with mockery. He didn't step back. He didn't speak. He just stood there. Hands in his pockets, devastatingly handsome that made the women giggled. Head tilted slightly to the side, as if he were merely waiting for a waiter at a high-end restaurant. The women on the side giggled. Some licked and bit their lips. Even they couldn't deny how unbearably magnetic he looked. His shirt strained against his broad chest. The men noticed. Their smirks started to falter. Their eyes darkened. One of them spat at the ground. Another cracked his knuckles. Then Daimon finally moved. Without a word, he raised a fist. And with a sudden, furious crash, slammed it against the passenger side window of Vasper's car. Shanti screamed. Her hands flew to her mouth as she shrank back in her seat. Her whole body shook. Her eyes met Daimon's through the tint. Pure rage burned in them. Daimon threw his head back and laughed. Come out, Whoever you are, he taunted, rapping his knuckles on the glass again. What are you hiding, Vasper? A stolen jewel? Vasper's smile vanished. In one blink, he was gone. In the next blink, he was already beside Daimon. With a force that defied logic, he grabbed Daimon by the collar and hurled him like a rag doll. The entire street gasped. Daimon's body flew through the air, his limbs flailing wildly before he crashed against the hood of his own sports car, denting the metal with a thunderous bang. His girlfriend screamed. Dust and broken fragments flew. The street fell deathly silent. All heads snapped to Vasper. He rolled his neck with a pop, stepping forward calmly as the men around him instinctively stepped back. The man with the gun raised it halfway, his hands trembling. But then, the Bugatti door opened, and Shanti stepped out. She didn't speak. She didn't even move quickly. She just emerged slowly, regally, her long golden hair flowing like silk in the wind. Her shirt and tight jeans hugged her curves in all the right places. Elegant and modest. But her beauty was beyond human. Beyond comprehension. She looked like a goddess descended to earth. A queen among mortals. Every woman in the crowd, despite their revealing outfits, seemed to shrink in her presence. Their smirks faded. Their confidence died. The men? They forgot the guns. They forgot the fight. They just stared, open-mouthed, dumbfounded. Vasper turned around when he heard the car door close. His eyes met Shanti's. Something in him, something primal, snapped into focus. She had disobeyed his warning. But she had done it for him. He didn't scold her. He didn't speak. He just grinned. And the day, once ruled by tension and fire, suddenly tilted in her favor. Because the queen had arrived. And she wasn't going to let her king stand alone. The crowd was still caught in a stunned haze when Vasper turned back to Shanti. Her beauty had frozen the entire scene, but for him, she was more than just breathtaking. She was his. He strode back toward her with purposeful steps. A living storm wrapped in human skin. As he reached her, he cupped her cheek with one hand and pressed a slow, possessive kiss to her lips, deep, claiming, defiant. The entire crowd stirred like a hornet's nest. Jealous gasps erupted from the women. Murderous glares burned from the men. But Vasper didn't care. His hand lingered on her waist, possessive. His lips parted from hers in slow motion, brushing against her skin like fire meeting silk. Back inside, he growled. Now. Shanti, breathless and stunned, obeyed. She stepped back into the car, the door closing with a solid thunk. But the rage in the air was just beginning to boil. Daimon, still sprawled across his dented car, groaned as his girlfriend rushed to him, helping him sit up. Blood trickled down his temple and split lip, but his glare was sharp. Locked on Shanti like a predator recognizing a rival queen. His eyes narrowed. Wait a damn minute, he rasped, spitting blood to the ground. I know that face. A crooked smile tugged at his bruised mouth. That's Jake Valerian's girl. The one he brought to the last grand circuit. The one who watched him beat your ass, Vasper. He barked out a bitter laugh. And now you're stealing her, too? Just like that? The crowd stirred again. The realization spread like wildfire. The girl's flirtatious confidence suddenly cracked. Guilt flashing in their eyes, unsure where they stood after throwing glances at the man who had stolen another woman again. As if their skimpy dresses suddenly made them feel small. The men, however, were seething. Their jealousy roared to life, fists clenching, jaws locking. Daimon rose unsteadily to his feet, brushing off his suit. His girlfriend clung to him, whispering for him to stop, but he slapped her hand away. You think you can keep taking whatever the hell you want, Mondragon? He growled, pointing a trembling, blood-streaked finger. You arrogant son of a... He didn't finish. Because Vasper moved. Lightning fast. He lunged with the wrath of a beast unchained, his fists hammering into Daimon with bone-breaking precision. A sickening crack echoed as Daimon's head snapped sideways. He crashed down again, this time not moving. The chaos exploded. The men surged toward Vasper. But they didn't stand a chance. Crack. Thud. Slam. Fists flew. Bodies soared. One by one. The rich boys were hurled like rag dolls. Their strength no match for Vasper's unrelenting fury. Some were flipped over car hoods. Others hit the pavement with groans and splintering pain. Blood sprayed. Teeth hit concrete. The women screamed, scattering. But their eyes never left him. Even in rage, Vasper looked devastatingly magnetic. His chest heaving, shirt torn open halfway. Sweat glistening on his chiseled body. Veins bulging down his arms. Powerful arms shifting with every explosive movement. God. One woman whispered breathlessly, clutching her chest. Is he that angry also? In bed? Another shivered, biting her lip. I'd let him break me in half. Inside the car, Shanti gripped the dashboard. Her heart thundered in her ears. She couldn't take it anymore. She pushed open the door and screamed. Vasper. But she didn't run to him. She couldn't. If the men saw her as the reason, she would only become a target. Still, her voice reached him through the chaos. Vasper's head snapped toward her. And in the blink of an eye, he was there. Right beside her. No one saw him move. No one could. Gasps erupted from the crowd. The girls stood frozen. Even the ones who had hated Shanti moments ago now wore stunned expressions of awe. As if witnessing a living legend. Don't come out again, he said, his voice hoarse, breath ragged. Face inches from hers. Please, my love. Let me finish this. His forehead pressed against hers. His touch lingering for just a heartbeat. She could smell the sweat, the blood in the air. But he still smelled like home. She nodded, trembling. Wait for me. I'll get us out. She obeyed, sliding back in. Vasper turned. Eyes blazing. And the women around her flinched. Hypnotized. They didn't move as he stared them down. They didn't even breathe. Then, bang! A single gunshot rang out. The crowd screamed. The bullet sliced through the air toward Vasper's head. But he twisted mid-step and rolled like a ghost in the wind. He was already sprinting at the shooter. The man, a tall brute with trembling hands, tried to run, but it was too late. Vasper drove his fist into his gut. Hard. The man's knees buckled, air rushing from his lungs with a choked wheeze. He collapsed. Unconscious. Vasper spun, aimed his fury at the blocked road. With a guttural growl, he slammed his boot into the bumper of one of the parked sports cars. The vehicle skidded sideways, tires screeching. He kicked the second one, boom, and it crashed into the gutter, clearing a narrow path. The women stared, some in shock, some flushed, some visibly aroused. He's not even real, one gasped, collapsing onto the sidewalk, hands trembling. Vasper didn't look back. He slid into the driver's seat, eyes burning, hands slick with blood and sweat. The Bugatti roared back to life. Behind them, red and blue lights began flashing. Police. Too late. Vasper slammed the pedal. The Bugatti lunged forward. A monstrous roar echoing through the hills. Crash. They barreled through the narrowed path. Metal scraping metal. Bumpers tearing off as the tourbillon forced itself through the gap. Sparks flew. The hood crumpled slightly from the brutal impact. But the car didn't stop. Inside, Shanta screamed. But her scream turned breathless as she looked at Vasper. His arm outstretched, his hand gripping her inner thigh with dominant, punishing heat. His eyes stayed locked on the road. But his fingers never stopped squeezing. She was breathless. Speechless. The world blurred around them. But she only saw him. And in that wild, heart-pounding moment of speed, chaos, and danger, she knew one truth. She would follow this man into fire. Inside the penthouse suite, at the very top floor of one of Paris City's most prestigious towers, owned entirely by Vasper Mondragon himself, she sat frozen on the white leather sofa. Her knees were drawn close to her chest, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a throw pillow. Her heart raced violently, anxiety clawing at her throat, almost suffocating her. Across from her, the large flat-screen television blared the morning news. And there, in full display, were her and Vasper, captured in crisp, merciless footage, eating together intimately at the five-star restaurant near the Eiffel Tower, walking hand in hand through the underground parking garage. Surveillance footage of them entering the Bugatti tourbillon. Then, the chaos. The footage cut to Vasper punching Daimon Levesque straight in the jaw. A scene so brutal it made Shanti gasp. Then it showed him kicking the front of a Lamborghini, denting the hood with a metallic crunch. The broadcast replayed the moment the Bugatti violently accelerated, smashing through two cars that tried to block the exit. The anchors' voices overlapped each other in rapid French, while the English translation scrolled at the bottom of the screen. Billionaire businessman Vasper Mondragon in violent rampage at Paris Street. 8 luxury cars damaged. Public outcry over reckless behavior. Investigation underway. Not a single second showed the full truth. No mention of Daimon's provocation. No context of what led to the chaos. They made it look like Vasper simply snapped. Shanta's mouth hung open in shock as she watched, horrified. "Oh my God. We're screwed," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she pressed a trembling hand over her lips, trying to hold in a sob. "They've definitely seen this already," she whimpered, her voice shaking. "David, Jasmine in Japan, everyone at the vineyard." A lump grew in her throat so fast it hurt. And they didn't even know yet that she and Vasper were already married. In the inner world, not the outer world. How could she explain this? Barely months after Jake Valerian's death. Her former husband. And now, here she was. Already seen dating. Kissing, entangled with another man. Even if she wanted to tell them the truth. About the inner world. About the marriage. She couldn't. It was forbidden. The news anchor kept speaking, flashing dramatic footage and scandalous headlines. The weight of it all crashed down on her shoulders. She couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred. Then, her body gave out, and she collapsed onto the soft white carpet, crying uncontrollably. Sobbing so hard it felt like her chest would cave in. Why now? Why during their honeymoon? Their plan to have lunch in Japan today. It was ruined. Now, they were public figures. Faces recognized around the world. There would be no peaceful escape. No hiding. The pressure was suffocating. She barely noticed the heavy footsteps approaching. Barely registered the deep masculine scent of soap, clean shampoo, and something darker. Something purely Vasper. Suddenly, she felt herself lifted off the ground. Effortlessly, like she weighed nothing. Vasper. He was there. His powerful arms cradling her against his damp, towel-wrapped lower body. His skin was cold. He had taken a freezing shower, no doubt to cool his blood after the violent confrontation. His hair was wet, his muscles still flexing under her touch. Every breath he took was steady, controlled. But his eyes were filled with deep concern. Without a word, he carried her into the vast master bedroom, where everything was pure white. The enormous bed, the soft pillows, the thick comforter. He laid her gently onto the bed and sat down beside her, towering yet tender. They locked eyes. Shanta's gaze, however, couldn't help but wander lower, to his broad chest, the defined ridges of his abdomen, the slight shimmer of water still clinging to his skin. She wiped her tears hastily, glancing at the open door. From the living room, she could still hear the news, their names being repeated endlessly. How did they find out so fast? Because of Vasper? Because of his name? Because of his power? Her mind spun wildly. Vasper noticed the terror in her eyes. Without hesitation, he leaned forward and pulled her into a tight embrace. His scent surrounded her completely. Safe, masculine, reassuring. "Don't worry," he murmured softly against her hair. "I'll handle everything. I'll pay 10 times the damages if that's what it takes. All they want is money. That's all." His voice was calm, firm, absolute, like a mountain that would not be moved. But Shanti pulled back, fresh tears brimming in her eyes. "That's not what I'm worried about, Vasper," she choked out, sobbing against his chest. Vasper frowned, confused. He brushed her cheeks with his thumb, concern shadowing his features. "What is it then?" he asked, searching her face. He bent closer and kissed her lips, soft, apologetic. But she didn't kiss him back. She just trembled under his touch. "I'm so sorry, my love," he whispered. "Forgive me for everything that happened. I didn't expect Daimon Levesque to follow us. I thought our paths would never cross again. Not after all these years. Please, forgive me." Shanti exhaled shakily, resting her forehead against his. Of course she forgave him. It wasn't Vasper's fault. But her heart was breaking with fear and guilt all the same. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to say how afraid she was for their families, for the people she loved. But the words were like chains inside her throat. Heavy, unmoving. Sensing her struggle, Vasper pulled back slightly and spoke in his usual commanding yet gentle tone. "I'll order food," he said. "We'll take it to the yacht. We'll go to Japan another day, after the news dies down a bit." He caressed her cheek again. "I already contacted the media camps," he added. "They'll start controlling the narrative. Don't worry, my love. I'm used to this. I always survive these storms." He smiled faintly. "Here in outer world, there's nothing money can't fix." His confidence was undeniable, radiating from every word, every breath. She could only stare at him, stunned. She knew Vasper was rich. Jake himself had told her once, with a knowing laugh, that Vasper was wealthier by several times. She had begun to realize the truth. But now she saw just how deeply untouchable Vasper could be in this world. But none of that eased her heart. Money wasn't her fear. It was the people she loved. What would they think of her? How would they look at her now? Would they hate her for moving on too quickly? Would they understand that she had found love again, not in betrayal? She knew. She couldn't tell them about the inner world marriage. It was forbidden. It was secret. And now, after everything, it was too late. They had already been seen, already judged. Her heart squeezed painfully as she clutched the pillow tighter. feeling the beginning of another wave of tears threatening to fall. She simply shut her eyes tightly and lay on her side, turning her back to Vasper, who watched her sadly. She felt like her entire body had been beaten. No strength left to move. And honestly, if she could avoid seeing Vasper right now, she would. The heaviness in her chest was unbearable, knowing deep inside that the root of the problem was about another woman. She felt Vasper lie down beside her, felt his hand gently but firmly wrap around her waist, pulling her closer. His deep, ragged breathing brushed against her skin. "Vasper, get dressed," Shantis said, her voice cold and emotionless. But there was no response. Instead, his arms tightened even more around her, trapping her against him, his face buried into her hair, breathing her in. She had taken a shower earlier, alone, despite Vasper's insistence to join her. Thankfully, she stood her ground. Now Vasper too, freshly showered, smelling of crisp soap and clean shampoo. Vasper still tried to fix the broken mood between them after everything that had happened. "Please. I'm sorry, my love," he whispered, voice trembling slightly with regret. "Forgive me. I can't stand it when you're upset with me. It hurts. I can't bear the thought that you're mad at me." His lips pressed softly against her hair, as she remained still, eyes tightly shut, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. She covered her face with the blanket, biting it hard to suppress the painful sobs breaking from her chest. She struggled, but the emotions were overwhelming, and Vasper's embrace only grew tighter, stubborn as ever. "Please," he whispered again, his voice cracking, burying his face against her neck, kissing her gently. That was when Shantis snapped. "Vasper? Can't you understand? I said no," she yelled, turning onto her back, furious and crying. Vasper immediately pulled away, stunned, staring at her with a serious expression. They locked eyes, neither speaking, breathing hard. His face shifted, but something else, something unreadable. She couldn't tell what he was thinking. And then, so gently, his fingers brushed away her tears. "Punish me," he whispered in a low, gravelly voice that sent shivers down her spine. "Punish me, so your anger at me will disappear." The air around them changed instantly. The way his wet hair fell messily across his forehead. The way his strong, sculpted face seemed even more devastatingly handsome. It was almost unfair. Something blocked her throat. She couldn't speak. Couldn't even tear her gaze away from him. "Please, not now," she thought desperately. Her body, traitorous and weak, against the pull of his presence, betrayed her resolve again. Her breathing quickened, especially when Vasper's large, warm hand began to slide slowly, almost reverently, up her exposed thigh. His weight shifted, pinning her more firmly against the bed. Her hands pushed at his chest. But it was hopeless. They were pressed tightly, skin to skin. Then, with an aggressive but smooth move, Vasper yanked off her panties, stripping them away as if they were nothing. Shanti gasped, her eyes flying wide open, watching in disbelief, as he tossed the tiny scrap of fabric straight out the door into the living room. She even caught a glimpse of it fluttering through the air. She had never seen Vasper like this before. The next thing she knew, he was spreading her thighs apart with firm hands. Not roughly, but with full control, forcing her legs wide open. She couldn't even form words. What was Vasper doing to her? Why wasn't she resisting? Was he using magic? Some kind of power? Why was she letting him do this? They still weren't speaking, only staring at each other. Vasper's sharp eyes watched her every tiny reaction. memorizing every shiver, every gasp. Waiting. He caressed her so slowly it was maddening. His touch feather light as he ran his fingers up her inner thighs. She was holding her breath, her heart hammering violently in her chest. When the tip of his finger finally brushed her core, barely touching, almost hovering, she gasped aloud, her entire body jolting from the sheer sensitivity. Her breathing became ragged, loud in the room. Then he did the same to her other thigh, teasing, grazing, never fully touching, driving her mad with anticipation. And again, when he reached her center, it was just the tip of his finger ghosting over her slick folds, which were already wet and needy. A soft, helpless moan escaped her lips. Then, slowly, deliberately, Vasper pushed her dress up, pulling it higher and higher. She pressed herself into the mattress, trying to resist, but it was useless. He raised her arms and peeled the dress over her head, completely stripping her bare. She didn't move. She didn't fight. She just lay there, helpless against the raw hunger in Vasper's eyes, and helpless against the storm raging inside herself. Vasper's gaze raked over her, starting from her trembling lips, trailing down to her bare breasts. Shanti watched him, holding her breath as he stared intensely at her chest, his jaw clenching tightly. His eyes continued downward, lingering over her belly, and then finally settling between her thighs. His hands gripped her thighs firmly, his fingers digging into her soft flesh as he pinned her open before him. Her breathing grew heavier, trembling under his scorching gaze. What was Vasper doing to her? Why was he just staring? And why was her body responding to him so helplessly? Vasper's eyes darkened further, and his entire body tensed, his muscles becoming hard and taut under his skin, as though he was fighting against himself. Slowly, one hand slid up to her lower belly, and she felt herself holding her breath again. But he didn't touch her where she needed him the most. Instead, he traced slow, agonizing circles around her core, deliberately avoiding her most sensitive spot. Frustration built inside her, and her body arched instinctively, silently begging for more. Then, Vasper finally spoke, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. "You're mine now," he said, almost in a tone of resentment. "You've always been mine. Even before. Jake never owned you. I never stole you from him. Because from the very beginning, you were destined for me." Shanta's eyes widened at the mention of Jake's name, her heart stumbling painfully. "Vasper, please. Don't bring up his name. Why would you even?" She tried to say, but before she could finish, Vasper moved. Without warning, he dove down between her thighs. She gasped sharply as she felt the hot, hungry press of his mouth against her core. Vasper devoured her like a man starved, his tongue lashing, sucking, tasting every inch of her with desperate, sinful hunger. His low, pleasured groans vibrated against her sensitive flesh, making her cry out in helpless pleasure. Her head fell back against the pillows, her eyes fluttering shut as her body surrendered completely to the overwhelming sensations. It was as if she was floating, weightless, carried higher and higher by the relentless heat of Vasper's mouth and tongue. She spread her legs wider without even thinking, desperate for more. But it still wasn't enough. Vasper grabbed her thighs, lifting them, spreading her completely open for him, bearing her fully to his eager tongue. He knelt between her legs, his mouth working harder, his lips and tongue feasting on her clit with ruthless, wet strokes that made her back arch off the bed. She moaned loudly, clutching Vasper's wet hair and shoving his face even closer against her. His tongue was everywhere, relentless, drawing tight spirals on her clit, flicking, teasing, tasting, until she thought she would lose her mind. Vasper showed no mercy, as if determined to suck her very soul out of her body. Then, without warning, he pulled his mouth away and trailed burning kisses up her trembling body, reaching her breasts. His mouth latched onto her sensitive peaks, sucking, teasing, nipping, while his hand returned to her dripping center, his fingers expertly rubbing slow, torturous circles on her clit. She whimpered, her body writhing beneath him, overwhelmed by the dual assault of his mouth and fingers. And when Vasper finally moved up to capture her lips in a kiss, it was nothing gentle. It was raw, fierce, passionate. A kiss that devoured her whole. Their moans merged into each other, their gasps loud against the background noise of the television still playing in the distant living room. She could only sob his name between breathless kisses. Vasper. Vasper. She gasped again and again, unable to hold it back. Then, she felt it. Vasper yanked off his towel completely, and Shanti froze as she felt the hard, heavy weight of him press insistently against her inner thigh. He was stone hard, thick and long, and it almost hurt where it brushed against her. Her breath hitched sharply. And then, without giving her a moment to think, Vasper guided himself to her slick, waiting entrance and began to push inside her. Slowly, deeply, every inch of him stretching and filling her. Her arms wrapped tightly around him, pulling him closer as a long, broken moan tore from her lips. Their cries mingled together, raw and desperate, filling the dim bedroom. Outside, the television continued to buzz quietly in the empty living room. But in here, the only sound was the symphony of their breathing, their moans, and the intoxicating sound of skin meeting skin as Vasper claimed her all over again. When Vasper finally pulled away from her swollen lips, he wasted no time. He lifted her effortlessly, hooking her thighs around his strong arms as she clung tightly to his neck. It was as if her weight meant nothing to him. He held her as though she were weightless, fragile, precious. Her head fell back with a loud moan as Vasper began to pound into her mercilessly, slamming deep, fast, and hard, while keeping his gaze locked onto her face, with a feral hunger. "Say it," he growled between brutal thrusts, his teeth sinking into his bottom lip as he stared at her flushed, wrecked expression. "Tell me you're mine. Say it, my love." "Yes, Vasper," she cried out, gasping and moaning as she struggled to catch her breath. "I'm yours. Only yours. My God. Yes. 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 Only yours." She screamed, her voice breaking with each desperate gasp. Vasper growled low in his chest, and the next moment he was lifting her even higher, thrusting up into her fiercely, each movement causing her to let out broken cries of pleasure. The room echoed with the obscene, wet sounds of their bodies colliding, the slap of skin on skin, and her cries growing louder and more desperate. "Oh my fucking God. Vasper!" she screamed, her hands tangling tightly into his hair, clutching him as though she might be swept away by the sheer overwhelming ecstasy he was giving her. Every brutal second that passed brought them closer to the edge. She could feel it in the way Vasper's thrusts grew harder, rougher, more erratic, his whole body trembling with restraint. "Look at me," he growled against her ear, his voice raw and commanding. Obediently, she dragged her dazed gaze up to meet his burning eyes. "Come with me, my love," he said through gritted teeth, his body shaking with the effort to hold back. Before she could even respond, their mouths crashed together again. Hungry, searching. their tongues battling for dominance, as they moaned into each other. And then it happened. With one final, deep thrust, they shattered together, like being slammed by a massive wave. She screamed into his mouth, her body convulsing around him, milking him hard, while she felt Vasper's cock jerk deep inside her, as he spilled himself into her, hot and powerful. Their bodies shook violently, clinging to each other as they rode out the intense, overwhelming orgasm. Vasper collapsed with her, still locked in his arms, lowering them both onto the bed without pulling out of her. Still joined, still connected. Their lips never parted, kissing feverishly, hungrily, desperate to hold on to the moment. Even after minutes had passed, Vasper stayed buried inside her, his weight comforting on top of her. His mouth never stopped moving against hers, whispering declarations between kisses, his voice hoarse and wrecked from passion. "I've never felt pleasure like this before," he murmured against her lips. "Only with you have I ever known this heaven." She smiled shyly, her hands running through his damp hair, her body still trembling slightly under his. "You know," Vasper whispered, pressing deeper into her as if he couldn't bear to separate. "No matter how many women I've had before, I never stayed buried inside them like this. I never wanted to. Only with you." She laughed breathlessly at his words, her cheeks flushing. "I wouldn't know," she teased, voice soft. "You're my first. And only." Vasper's face lit up with boyish pride at her admission. "I'm so damn lucky," he whispered reverently. "Unfair," she protested playfully, laughing. Vasper chuckled low in his throat, the sound vibrating against her chest. His eyes, still dark with desire, stared at her with raw devotion. She was about to tease him more when Vasper suddenly froze, staring at her with such intensity that it stole her breath. Without warning, he captured her lips again in a slow, possessive, burning kiss. "Take everything from me. Just don't leave me," he whispered brokenly against her mouth. She only smiled softly against his lips, overwhelmed by the weight of his love. "Am I lucky?" she teased. "That you fell for me?" She giggled, and Vasper, unable to resist, pinched her cheek playfully before dropping his forehead to hers. "You have no idea how lucky," he replied. Vasper grinned and pressed another kiss to her lips, soft and lingering. "For so long. Even when I was with 2, sometimes 3 women at once, I was never satisfied," he confessed, voice low. At that, she made a face of disgust. "Yuck. Vasper. That's gross," she shrieked, turning her head away in mock horror. Vasper burst into laughter, the sound boyish and genuine. "Where were you back then, huh? Why did you only show up now?" he teased, nudging her chin gently with his nose. She still refused to meet his gaze, pouting stubbornly. So Vasper, mischievous as ever, shifted his hips and drove deeper inside her, causing her to gasp loudly and involuntarily face him again. "You stop it," she cried, smacking his shoulder playfully. "Sorry," he chuckled, nuzzling her cheek. I had to get your attention." His voice dropped to a tender whisper. "You know, I only stay buried like this with you. Only you." The sincerity in his words made her heart swell painfully in her chest. She finally lifted her gaze to meet his. As their eyes locked, Vasper began to move inside her again. Slow, deep thrusts that reignited the fire between them. She clutched his arms tightly, feeling the hard muscles flex under her fingers as he moved within her, filling her perfectly. "You really are different, my love," Vasper whispered, his thrusts slow but devastating. "Now that you're my wife, there's no other dream I have, except to spend my entire life making you happy." His hands roamed her body again, slow and heated, and she couldn't stop the moans escaping her lips, as her body caught fire once more under his touch. Vasper's breathing grew heavier, as he felt Shanta's body heating up again under him, her soft whimpers music to his ears. Without a warning, he pulled out slowly, making her gasp, only to flip her effortlessly onto her stomach. Before she could even process what was happening, he grabbed her hips, lifting her ass high, forcing her onto her knees. She moaned at the roughness, at the way Vasper manhandled her like she weighed nothing. "Stay just like that, my love," he growled hungrily, his voice raw, almost dangerous. In the next second, she felt him, hard and throbbing, sliding between her folds, teasing her soaked entrance before thrusting back inside her in one brutal, hard stroke. She screamed into the mattress, her nails clawing at the sheets, as Vasper slammed into her over and over again. Deep, fast, relentless. But he didn't stop there. While he pounded into her from behind, one of his large hands slid under her body, finding her clit with deadly precision. He circled it with his fingers, firm and fast, perfectly matching the rough, punishing rhythm of his hips. "Fuck. Vasper," she sobbed, her whole body shaking from the overwhelming pleasure. "You're mine," Vasper grunted, leaning over her back, biting down lightly on her shoulder. "You were made for me." He thrust even harder, deeper, and she felt her mind slipping, her body giving out under the intensity. She couldn't hold herself up anymore. Her arms collapsed beneath her. But Vasper didn't stop. He hooked his arm around her waist, holding her up against him, forcing her to take every brutal thrust. Her clit throbbed violently under his relentless fingers, and when he pinched it lightly while driving deep inside her, she almost blacked out from the intensity. "Fuck. Vasper. I can't," she cried, tears of pleasure streaming from her eyes. "You can," he growled possessively against her ear. "You will." And just like that, he flipped her again, this time onto her side, hooking one of her legs over his shoulder while he stayed inside her, thrusting deep at an angle that made her scream his name. The new position allowed him even deeper access, each thrust dragging delicious friction against her most sensitive spots. He reached down again, rubbing her clit in tight, desperate circles, pushing her closer and closer to the edge. She was sobbing now, unable to stop the onslaught of pleasure. Every nerve ending lit up like fire. Vasper's free hand gripped her jaw, forcing her to look into his eyes. "Watch me claim you," he growled. "Look at how beautiful you are, falling apart for me." Her whole body tensed violently, her leg trembling over his shoulder. She was so close, so damn close. Vasper slammed into her harder, faster, never once stopping the ruthless circles on her clit. And finally, she shattered. She screamed his name, her body convulsing violently around him, pulling him deeper as wave after wave of orgasm tore through her. But Vasper wasn't done. While she was still trembling, he shifted again, lifting her effortlessly and sitting back on the bed, impaling her on his cock. Now, she was straddling him, facing him, her legs trembling around his hips. He grabbed her ass and began bouncing her up and down on him, his strength and stamina seemingly endless. "Ride me, my love," he growled lowly, biting at her neck. "Use me. Take everything you need." She whimpered brokenly, barely able to move. So Vasper took over again, thrusting upward brutally while grinding her down against him, his thumb once again finding her sensitive clit, teasing her mercilessly. She was too sensitive, too overwhelmed, but it only made the sensations even sharper, even more devastating. "I'm not stopping until I feel you come on me again," he whispered roughly against her ear. And just like that, she was screaming again, clinging desperately to him, nails digging into his shoulders as she fell apart a second time, her body tightening around him so violently that Vasper cursed loudly into her hair. He thrust up a few more savage times before he stilled, grinding deep, and spilled into her again. Hot, pulsing, endless, his growls of pleasure vibrating against her skin. They clung to each other, trembling, panting heavily, drenched in sweat and love and lust. Vasper kept her close, not allowing her to move even an inch away, staying buried deep inside her as though afraid she might disappear. "You're mine," he whispered against her temple. "Only mine. Forever." And she, still breathless, still trembling in his arms, could only nod, whispering, "Only yours, Vasper. Forever." Still buried deep inside her, Vasper lifted her effortlessly from the bed, one strong arm under her ass, the other cradling her trembling back. Their bodies were slick with sweat, their breathing ragged, but Vasper didn't care. He needed her again, needed more of her. Without pulling out, he carried her across the room, their bodies still fused, each step sending delicious friction inside her, making her whimper and clutch him tighter. He kicked open the bathroom door, steam already filling the space as the hot water from the shower poured down. "Vasper, I can't," she gasped weakly, her body oversensitive. But Vasper just growled, "You can. And you will." He stepped into the large shower, the hot water cascading over their tangled bodies, washing away the evidence of their previous release, only to make room for more. Pinning her hard against the cold marble wall, Vasper thrust back into her with a brutal, merciless force that made her cry out. The contrast of the icy marble against her back and the molten heat of Vasper inside her was maddening. He slammed into her, fast and deep. No mercy, no hesitation. His strong hips snapping against hers with wet, filthy sounds blending with the pounding water. At the same time, he reached between them again, his fingers finding her clit with deadly precision, rubbing fast and rough, making her thrash and scream against him. "God, you're so fucking perfect," he growled into her ear, his voice hoarse, broken with pure lust. "So wet, so tight, made for me." Her head was thrown back, her moans echoing off the tiles, as her nails raked down Vasper's back, leaving angry red marks. He loved it. He thrust harder, feeling her body tighten and quake around him, her legs trembling as he pinned her high against the wall. "Look at me," he commanded, his tone dark, dominant. She forced her glassy eyes to meet his, and the intensity there, the sheer possession in Vasper's gaze, made her body explode again without warning. Her scream was swallowed by his lips as he kissed her fiercely, devouring her cries while her orgasm wrecked her entire being. But he didn't stop. Vasper spun them around, pinning her against the glass wall of the shower now. Her breasts pressed flat against the clear, fogging glass, while he stood behind her, spreading her legs wider with his knees. He drove into her from behind. Deep, brutal thrusts that made the entire glass wall tremble, with every savage snap of his hips. His fingers tangled in her wet hair, yanking her head back so he could growl directly against her ear. Feel that? Every inch of me buried inside you? That's where I belong. Inside you. Always. She sobbed, half crazed with pleasure, as Vasper slammed into her again and again, one hand gripping her throat lightly, possessively, while his other hand played ruthlessly with her clit, stroking, pinching, circling. It was too much. Too deep. Too rough. Too perfect. Her body gave out completely, collapsing against the glass. But Vasper caught her, wrapping his arms around her waist, and holding her up, still fucking her relentlessly. Come for me, my love. He snarled against her ear, pounding her harder. Now. And she screamed his name, coming undone once more, shaking uncontrollably in his arms. Vasper thrust once, twice more, and then growled low in his throat, slamming deep and spilling inside her again, his entire body trembling with the force of his orgasm. For a long moment, they stayed like that, pressed against the steaming glass, trembling, gasping, clinging to each other, as though the world beyond them didn't exist. Slowly, Vasper turned her around, still inside her, kissing her slow, deep, messy, full of so much love it almost hurt. I will never get enough of you, he whispered against her swollen lips. And I will never let you go. Still kissing her breathless, Vasper slid out slowly, making her gasp at the loss. But before she could even protest, he scooped her up into his arms like she weighed nothing at all. Not done. He growled against her neck, nipping at her sensitive skin. You're not walking away from me. Not until you know exactly who you belong to. Still dripping wet from the shower, he carried her back to the massive bed, water glistening on their overheated skin. He threw her down gently, only to immediately grab a soft towel nearby, twisting it expertly. She barely had a second to breathe before he seized her wrists, wrapping the towel around them, binding her hands softly above her head. Her breath hitched, eyes wide with a mix of nervousness and burning arousal. Vasper hovered over her, his cock already hardening again, veins throbbing, looking impossibly bigger, angrier. You trust me? He asked darkly, voice a low rumble. Yes, she whispered, her heart pounding against her ribs. Good. Without another word, he slid down, mouth finding her nipples again, sucking them roughly until she cried out, arching into his mouth, wrists twisting against the restraint. He kissed his way lower, between her spread thighs, teasing her folds cruelly, with the tip of his tongue, slow and maddening, while his fingers rubbed and played with her clit in fast, relentless circles. You're already dripping again. Fuck. You were made for me. He groaned. Her hips bucked wildly, but Vasper only chuckled darkly and pinned her hips down, not letting her move. He tortured her with feather-light flicks of his tongue, never giving her enough, until she was writhing and begging. Please. Vasper. Please. Please. She whimpered, desperate. Please what, baby? He teased, nipping her sensitive inner thigh. Tell me exactly what you want. I want you inside me. Please. Vasper. Please. I can't. She was sobbing now, incoherent. Vasper's eyes darkened, his jaw clenching as he grabbed her hips roughly and positioned himself at her entrance. You want it rough, my love? He snarled. I'll give you everything. He slammed into her in one deep, brutal thrust, making her scream out loud, the entire bed jerking under the force. He didn't hold back. He pounded her relentlessly, each thrust knocking her further up the bed. Her arms stretched above her head, helpless, completely at his mercy. His hands were everywhere, gripping her hips brutally, spreading her thighs wide open, playing with her clit between thrusts, making sure she was overstimulated, wrecked, crying his name. She was gone, her mind shattered from the overwhelming sensations, her body a toy in his strong, merciless hands. Her thighs trembled violently. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes, from the sheer overwhelming pleasure. But Vasper didn't stop. He flipped her onto her stomach without pulling out, yanking her hips up so she was kneeling, her face buried in the pillows, her ass high in the air. He grabbed her bound wrists, pulling them back toward him, arching her beautifully while he pounded into her even deeper, hitting angles that made her scream into the mattress. Wet, filthy sounds filled the room along with the heavy slap of their bodies colliding. She was completely gone, whimpering, babbling incoherent pleas. That's it. My love, take it. Vasper growled, his own release building viciously. Take all of me. And when he felt her tightening again, her whole body clenching uncontrollably around him, he thrust brutally deep, burying himself to the hilt. Come with me, my love. Now, he commanded harshly, and they exploded together, Vasper releasing deep inside her with a guttural, broken roar. She sobbing and convulsing around him, milked for every last drop. They collapsed onto the bed in a tangled heap, Vasper covering her bound body with his, raining kisses on her trembling shoulders, her cheeks, her forehead. He gently untied her wrists, massaging them with slow, apologetic kisses, whispering praises against her skin. My brave girl. My beautiful wife. You took me so good, my love. She could only whimper weakly in response, her entire body feeling like jelly, her legs useless. Vasper sat up and lifted her effortlessly into his arms again, cradling her against his chest, as if she were the most precious thing in the world, tucking the blanket around her naked body with care. Then he slid in beside her, pulling her into his arms tightly, his hand stroking her hair, his other hand possessively resting over her lower belly, exactly where he had just filled her. So proud of you, my love, he whispered against her ear. So fucking proud you're mine. And as Shanty drifted off into a deep, blissful sleep in his arms, Vasper stayed awake a while longer, simply holding her, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. His heart so full it hurt. His queen. His wife. His forever. The early morning light poured softly through the massive windows, casting golden patterns across the sheets. She stirred with a sleepy moan, her body sore in places she didn't even know could be sore. She turned her head and immediately saw Vasper, already awake, propped up on one elbow, lazily tracing his fingers across her bare back, his eyes smoldering with lazy, possessive adoration. Good morning, Mrs. Mondragon, he whispered, his voice deep and still hoarse from last night. She gave him a tiny smile and stretched, or tried to, because the moment she moved her legs, she whimpered and collapsed back into the bed with a soft gasp. Vasper's low, wicked chuckle rumbled in his chest, as he leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. Careful, baby. he teased, voice dripping with pride. I did tell you. You'd be walking funny. She groaned, hiding her burning face in the pillow. You ruined me. She mumbled against the fabric. Half mortified, half deliriously happy. Vasper laughed and kissed the side of her head, looking absurdly pleased with himself. You're welcome, he murmured smugly. Still, he was impossibly gentle. He sat up, throwing the blanket aside, lifting her easily into his arms again. She gasped and wrapped her arms around his neck instinctively. Vasper, I can walk, she protested weakly. He gave her a pointed look, one brow arching. Really? He drawled. Is that what you call crawling and falling back to bed? She scowled and pounded a tiny fist against his chest, which of course made him laugh even more. A low, sexy, affectionate sound. He carried her all the way to the bathroom, sitting her carefully on the counter again. And without a word, he knelt in front of her, his strong hands cradling her thighs, and pressed a slow, reverent kiss against each bruised, sore spot on her hips and inner thighs. Every kiss sent shivers up her spine, and her heart melted at the unexpected tenderness. I'm sorry you're sore, he whispered against her skin, voice turning almost regretful. But I'm not sorry. I made you mine like that. She smiled down at him, running her fingers through his messy hair. You're such a brute, she teased softly. He grinned wolfishly up at her, his hands stroking higher. You love this brute, he said simply, pressing another kiss right above her sensitive core, causing her to gasp. God help me, I do, she whispered breathlessly. Standing up, Vasper scooped her into a warm, luxurious bath he had already prepared for her, full of rose petals and lavender-scented water, cradling her carefully between his legs as he bathed her like a goddess. He washed her hair gently, massaged her sore thighs, his touch slow and cherishing, whispering love against her wet skin between kisses. He made sure she didn't lift a single finger, pampering her completely. After the bath, he dressed her himself, in one of his oversized, soft white shirts that drowned her frame. He insisted on carrying her back to bed even though she pouted and argued. And as he tucked her back under the sheets, he kissed her forehead tenderly. Rest, my queen, he whispered. And later, his eyes gleamed with wicked promise. Later, when you're ready, we'll start all over again. She giggled weakly, feeling like the luckiest, most loved woman in the world, as Vasper slipped into bed beside her, wrapping her tightly in his strong arms, never letting her go. And that morning, the only thing heavier than her exhaustion was Vasper's love, possessive and endless, wrapped around her like a second skin. Later that morning, after a few more hours of blissful sleep, Vasper insisted on making breakfast for her. Shanta sat at the massive kitchen island, wearing nothing but Vasper's huge white shirt, the hem barely reaching mid-thigh. Her hair was a sexy, messy wave, her cheeks still flushed with the afterglow of what they did. She tried to sit properly, but every time she shifted, she winced a little. And Vasper definitely noticed. Standing shirtless by the stove, wearing only sweatpants that hung dangerously low on his hips, Vasper smirked, proud and unapologetic. Need a pillow, baby? He teased, flipping the pancakes with ease. She narrowed her eyes at him, pretending to glare, but her cheeks burned. This is all your fault, she huffed, crossing her arms over her chest. Vasper gave her a wicked grin over his shoulder. You weren't exactly complaining last night, my love, he teased back smoothly. Or the first time, or the second, or the third. Vasper! She shrieked in embarrassment, covering her face. He chuckled low, the sound rolling through the kitchen like thunder, sexy and rich. Striding over to her with a plate of fluffy pancakes, he set it down and leaned over her, caging her in with his arms. He tilted her chin up with one finger, his eyes sparkling with mischievous heat. "I'm sorry, my queen," he whispered against her lips, though his smug smile said otherwise. "But if ruining you means you'll look this beautiful, flushed and glowing for me." He kissed the corner of her mouth, slow and lingering. "Then I'll never stop." She bit her lip, giggling helplessly against him, feeling her heart overflow with love and desire. "And besides," he murmured, tracing a finger slowly down her throat, across the shirt she wore. His shirt. "You wearing my clothes while wincing because of what I did to you." He growled low in his throat, dark eyes gleaming. "It's the hottest damn thing I've ever seen." "You're insatiable," she whispered, blushing furiously. He grinned. "And you're mine." Without waiting another second, Vasper swooped down and kissed her. Deep, slow, claiming, making her forget the world again. Right there, barefoot in the kitchen, with breakfast forgotten, and the morning sunlight wrapping around them like a blessing. She had barely lifted her fork to her mouth when Vasper moved, like a wolf catching the scent of prey. His hunger snapped. But it wasn't for food. With a growl deep in his chest, he grabbed her by the waist, lifting her easily off the stool. She squealed in surprise, laughing breathlessly as he set her down on the cold marble countertop, right next to the pancakes. "Vasper, your pancakes." "Later," he growled, voice rough with need. "You're sweeter." Before she could protest, his mouth was already on her, kissing her deeply, hungrily, like a man starving. His hands roamed her thighs under the oversized shirt, impatient, possessive, pushing it up higher until she was bare to him once again. "You drive me insane, my love," he whispered against her skin, leaving a trail of hot, open-mouthed kisses down her neck, her collarbone, lower. "One look at you, and I forget everything else." His fingers found her center, stroking her clit in slow, devastating circles, making her hips jerk instinctively toward his touch. "Still sensitive," she gasped. "Already trembling again. Already burning." Vasper lifted his head just enough to look into her eyes. Dark, feral, full of worship. "You're always ready for me," he whispered, sliding 2 fingers inside her while his thumb teased her swollen bud. "So perfect. So mine." She moaned loudly, gripping his shoulders, arching her back on the countertop. And then, without warning, Vasper tugged her closer to the edge, yanked down his sweatpants just enough, and drove into her with a deep, possessive thrust that made her cry out. "Vasper. Shoo, baby," he murmured, kissing her as he started thrusting. Hard, slow, deep. The kitchen filling with the obscene, wet sounds of their bodies connecting. The marble countertop was cold under her back, but Vasper's hands were hot, rough on her thighs, holding her wide open for him, grinding deeper with every savage thrust. He never once stopped playing her clit, his fingers ruthless, while pounding into her, rough but worshipful, each stroke claiming her again and again. "You're mine," he gritted out against her ear, his voice shaking. "My wife. My fucking world." She was a trembling, moaning mess, her nails digging into his back, her cries echoing in the vast kitchen, drowning out even the ticking clock on the wall. She shattered first, her climax crashing over her so hard. But Vasper didn't stop. He held her tight as she convulsed around him, thrusting even harder, chasing his own release. "Look at me, my love. Look at me while I come inside you." Through blurry eyes, she met his gaze. And the pure, raw emotion she saw there, possession, devotion, love, sent her spiraling again. With a final savage thrust, Vasper buried himself deep and exploded inside her, moaning her name like a prayer. They stayed there, locked together, trembling, breathless, for long moments as the world melted away. Later, Vasper carried her back to bed, refusing to let her feet touch the ground. She was giggling, flushed, but every step he took made her whimper a little. Her thighs were sore, her body deliciously wrecked. She couldn't even squeeze her legs together without feeling him. "You broke me," she whispered against his chest, half teasing, half serious. Vasper just smiled that cocky, completely unrepentant smile as he tucked her carefully under the blankets, brushing the hair off her sweaty forehead with infinite tenderness. "Damn right I did," he murmured proudly. "And I'm not even sorry." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her lips, reverent, slow. Then he slid into bed beside her, pulling her against his chest, wrapping himself around her like a shield. "My wife," he whispered against her hair. "My everything." And she, utterly exhausted and blissfully happy, fell asleep in his arms, knowing she would never, ever want anything else for the rest of her life. The morning sun spilled golden light across the sprawling penthouse, catching the glint of the glass walls and the sleek marble floors. From the balcony, the world below looked like a living painting. Bustling, noisy, chaotic, but up here, it was silent, peaceful, untouched. Vasper sat lazily on a lounge chair, his back against the cushions, legs stretched out with careless grace. Shanti perched sideways on his lap, her arms loosely wrapped around his shoulders, their bodies intimately close, almost melting into one. They shared a quiet breakfast. Warm croissants, freshly sliced fruits, and rich cappuccino. Resting on a small nearby table, Vasper's fingers lazily traced circles along Shanta's bare thigh, his eyes half-lidded, drinking in the rare, perfect stillness between them. She chuckled softly, brushing his messy hair back with gentle fingers. "You look way too relaxed," she teased, her voice still husky and soft from sleep. He smirked, lifting her hand to his lips and pressing a slow, tender kiss against her wrist. "Maybe because you're here," he murmured against her skin. Then, unable to resist, he captured her lips in a deep, passionate kiss. His hand slid inside the soft folds of her dress, cupping her breast firmly, drawing a soft chuckle from her lips as she pressed closer. His other hand roamed lower, slipping along the curve of her back, pulling her tighter against him until there was no space left between their bodies. "I still can't believe that such a simple morning like this," Vasper whispered against her lips, his voice thick with emotion, "could make me feel this peaceful, so completely happy. Because of you, Mrs. Mondragon." Their lips parted, but their foreheads stayed pressed together, breathing the same breath. Their eyes locked, speaking without words, pouring out silent confessions, full of love, full of longing. Shanta's hand lifted to cradle his cheek, her thumb gently brushing against his lips, the touch sending sparks of electricity straight through Vasper's blood. He didn't move, didn't kiss her again. He just let her touch him, because he wanted to hear whatever she needed to say. In his mind, he marveled again at how beautiful his wife looked, framed against the golden glow of the morning sun, like something celestial. She hesitated, her heart thudding painfully. I didn't want to ask, but... She whispered, her voice fragile. Did you used to bring Samara here too? You mentioned once. You brought her to Paris. The words betrayed her, slipping out before she could stop them. And immediately, regret stabbed her heart. A fleeting, almost pained smile curved Vasper's lips. Not out of joy, but something deeper. Something heavier. He nodded slowly, tightening his arms around her waist. Her gaze drifted away toward the horizon, unable to meet his eyes, focusing on the endless stretch of city and skyscrapers beyond the balcony. But Vasper wouldn't let her retreat. He gently turned her face back toward him, his hands firm but tender, his eyes pleading. That was before, he said in a low, urgent voice. Before you came into my life. Before we ever even met. She fought the storm brewing inside her chest. She didn't want to ruin this morning. She didn't want her heart to overtake her mind. Vasper saw the struggle in her, and softened even more. And the last time we're here was just before I returned home. He added, almost desperately. And right after that, I met you. From that moment, everything changed. They stared at each other for a long, aching moment. Shanti couldn't stop the flicker of jealousy inside her, even though she knew there was no reason anymore. They were married. Vasper had nothing to prove, and yet he still tried, every day, to show her. Vasper smiled at her, a slow, boyish grin breaking the tension. He kissed her again, softly, teasingly. Don't ask about my past with women anymore, he said with a chuckle, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. Because you know I'll always tell you the truth. And it'll just make you jealous. Shanti rolled her eyes, but a reluctant smile played on her lips. Why would I be jealous? She replied, trying to sound nonchalant. I wasn't even part of your life yet. You were free to do whatever, with whomever, you wanted. Her tone, however, betrayed her. A soft bite, a hint of bitterness. Vasper burst out laughing. A loud, deep laugh that echoed against the open sky. He leaned back against the lounge chair, shaking his head, eyes crinkling with genuine amusement. His perfect teeth flashed, and she felt her heart betray her again. How could she stay mad when he looked like that? Annoyed at herself, she scowled and made a move to stand up. But Vasper, still chuckling, caught her wrist, pulling her back into his lap with surprising force, and kissed her fiercely. A kiss that seared her to her core. A kiss full of 100 unspoken promises. She gasped into his mouth, her arms instinctively wrapping around his neck. She could feel him, hard, solid, beneath her. The evidence of his desire pressing insistently against her inner thigh. The heat between them ignited instantly. Vasper's hand slid up, cupping her breast again through the thin fabric of her dress, his thumb brushing her nipple, until she whimpered helplessly into his mouth. She melted against him, surrendering to the fire sparking between them. One of his arms locked tightly around her waist, pulling her even closer, trapping her securely on his lap. The world spun away. Just the two of them. The heat of their bodies. The overwhelming need to lose themselves in each other. When suddenly, the telephone inside the living room started to ring. Its sharp, shrill sound shattered the atmosphere like glass breaking. Vasper ignored it completely, his mouth still moving hungrily against hers. She squirmed slightly, trying to pull away, but Vasper growled softly and held her tighter, refusing to let her go. Let it ring, he muttered against her lips. Leave it. Vasper said, his voice so addictively deep it made her skin tingle. The phone eventually stopped ringing. They continued kissing, lost in their fiery embrace. Vasper moved his hand from her breast and, without any effort, lifted her by the waist, settling her onto his lap in a straddling position. His mouth was hot and desperate against her skin, trailing kisses from her lips down to her neck, while his hands roamed her bare back and hips, pressing her closer, grinding her against the angry hardness straining beneath his shorts. She instinctively matched his movements, grinding against him, her moans music to his ears. "I love you, my love," Vasper whispered heatedly against her neck, his tongue burning a trail across her sensitive skin. The heat between them built rapidly, their breathing heavy, their bodies frantic for more. But just as Vasper's hands roamed even lower, the phone began ringing again, shrill, insistent, cutting through the haze of desire. It had to be important. Still gasping for breath, she managed to pull away slightly, locking her wide, dazed eyes on Vasper's flushed, disheveled face. His hair was wild from her hands, and she couldn't help but laugh softly as she tried to smooth it down. "Answer it," she said between breaths. Even as Vasper leaned in to capture her lips again, she stopped him with a playful tug on his hair. "It might be important." The phone kept blaring. With an irritated but slightly amused grunt, Vasper stood up, carefully setting Shanty down first and pressing a quick kiss to her lips before teleporting toward the phone, bringing her with him, keeping her close at his side. She smiled fondly at him, watching him move. Unknown number. Vasper's entire body tensed. His instincts screamed danger. Without letting go of her, he snatched the phone up and answered, his voice ice cold. "Vasper Mondragon." The voice on the other end was clipped, devoid of emotion. "You're requested at the Black Crown Hotel. Conference room level. Daimon Levesque. His representatives and legal counsel will be waiting." Vasper's expression shifted instantly, his features sharpening, darkening. She noticed, her heart tightening with unease as she watched him closely. Vasper said nothing. He just listened, but his jaw clenched visibly, his grip on the phone tightening until his knuckles whitened. Daimon and his powerful family were setting the stage. Not just a confrontation, but a full-blown attempt to humiliate and crush a Mondragon. A high-stakes challenge had been issued. Win the race, the video would be destroyed. Lose, and Shanty would become the prize. If Vasper refused to race, they would leak to the world the highly classified footage of him, moving faster than humanly possible. Her curiosity burned, but the fear in her gut was stronger. The line abruptly went dead. Vasper slowly lowered the phone, his jaw ticking dangerously. She straightened up, feeling the heavy shift in the air around him. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vasper stared out over the city skyline, his fingers unconsciously tightening around her waist. "They're not accepting the payment," he said, voice low, lethal. "Not even 10 times the value." Her mouth fell open in shock. "Why? What do they want?" The softness vanished from Vasper. His movements turned cold, predatory. The coiled grace of a beast preparing for battle. "They want a race," he said darkly, his hand cradling her face tenderly, almost in contrast to the violence stirring inside him. "A public race." His eyes locked onto hers, the full weight of his next words dropping like a hammer. "And they want you as the prize." The world tilted under her feet. Her heart nearly stopped. Her hand flew to her chest as she gasped. "That's insane." but Vasper was already moving, sliding on his custom watch with mechanical efficiency, every gesture lethal and precise. They also threatened to release a video. He growled. From that day. Footage of me. He hesitated, the words searing his throat like acid. Footage of me moving faster than any human being. Shanta's face paled. Vasper crossed the room in 2 powerful strides, caging her against the wall. Their foreheads pressed together for a grounding second. I won't let them touch you, he growled, his voice a vibrating promise of violence barely restrained. I'll handle this, he muttered as he stormed off toward the walk-in closet to change. Shanti, heart pounding in terror, quickly followed him, struggling to keep up with the furious pace of his long strides.